Humanity's gift. Blazkowicz put on his gauntlets. Although he didn't feel uncomfortable in the vacuum, wearing armor was still a safeguard. They sprinted at a 90-degree angle on the sky pillar. The further they got from Argent Noor's gravitational environment, the faster they became. To prevent accidents, Blazkowicz connected Harlan with a thin fiber rope, to avoid them losing their footing in the cosmic environment. Master and servant ran on the orbit. To speed up, Blazkowicz sometimes carried Harlan forward. In the zero-gravity environment, Blazkowicz was like an accelerating meteor, moving rapidly along the orbit. "We're almost at the defense platform," Harlan said, held by Blazkowicz, as he reviewed data on outer space. At 20,000 kilometers on the sky pillar, far from the planetary defense system, there were numerous automated defense platforms. "I see them." Blazkowicz had already seen the faint glow of equipment outline lights flickering against the dark cosmic background. "Can we avoid them?" he asked in a low voice, stepping onto the outer wall of the sky pillar, temporarily stopping. "I'm afraid not." Harlan shook his head, raising his hand to show Blazkowicz ancient records. Automated defense platforms are distributed along the entire sky pillar, between 20,000 and 30,000 kilometers, with no blind spots for attack. Blazkowicz lowered his head in thought. A 10,000-kilometer journey was a death road covered in firepower. As long as they got through here, it would be a success. The Noor ring was silent, and the ring's defensive firepower was also offline, so there was no problem there. "I have a method," Harlan, seeing Blazkowicz preparing to charge through, offered a suggestion for his consideration. "We can use weapons to dig a hole in the wall and bypass the automated fire platforms from inside the sky pillar." "No," Blazkowicz thought for a moment, then shook his head, rejecting the proposal. Entering the sky pillar would mean returning to a gravitational environment, greatly reducing their speed, and the danger would be just as great. A 1-kilometer thick alloy wall would be no easy feat to excavate. "We'll just charge through." Seeing his mind was made up, Harlan said no more and silently activated his defense system. Blazkowicz grabbed Harlan and no longer jumped forward, but used his magnetic boots to gain mobility by staying grounded. He shut off the internal assist of his power armor. With his full power unleashed, the system couldn't keep up with Blazkowicz's speed and would even be counterproductive. "Go!" Blazkowicz let out a low growl and shot out like a bolt of lightning. In the zero-gravity environment, his body, which ran at supersonic speeds in the planet's atmosphere, burst forth with incredible speed. 3,000 meters per second. And it was still increasing. Harlan, looking at the real-time speed displayed on his helmet, was numb. Fortunately, they were in space, otherwise he would now be a pile of rotten flesh inside his armor. Blazkowicz carried Harlan, constantly accelerating and evading. This was not his limit, it was the limit of the magnetic boot's circuit breaker. Any faster and the circuit breaker would malfunction, causing rapid wear on the power armor. The automated defense platforms suspended in the void quickly scanned and detected the intruders, emitting a red glow. Lasers, solid projectiles, plasma. Various types of firepower poured down, forming a colorful net of fire in the silent vacuum. Blazkowicz moved through it, his body instinctively giving him warnings. His brain worked at high speed, finding loopholes in the net of fire. He was like an incredibly slippery fish, immediately stopping and changing direction before being locked on, heading to the next safe spot. Harlan tensed his body, watching lasers graze his armor and feeling the high temperature of plasma penetrate the armor. If he had tried to break through himself, he would probably have died 800 times over. He steadied his breathing, not daring to disturb Blazkowicz's thoughts, rigid like a corpse. "Don't be nervous." Blazkowicz, however, had relaxed. After mastering the weapon's firing patterns, his slippery movements were effortless. "How can you expect me not to be nervous?" Harlan's voice was stiff, and he dared not move. The trajectories of projectiles were inches away in his goggles, and the alarm blared incessantly. He couldn't imagine how Blazkowicz could maintain such composure while carrying him during prolonged, high-intensity evasion. In tense silence, Harlan spent 2 hours before being carried out of the automated defense platform's fire net. "We need to rest for a bit." A voice came through the communicator, and Harlan's tense heart somewhat calmed. So Blazkowicz got tired too. But the next sentence made his mouth twitch. Blazkowicz lifted his foot. The bottom of his combat boot was red, radiating heat. "Let's walk a bit slower and wait for the magnetic boots to cool down." The magnetic boot's circuit breaker had reached its limit, switching on and off hundreds of times per second. The heat inside the armor had reached its peak, and the cooling system was overwhelmed, needing time to cool down. The two waited for their equipment to cool, then accelerated forward with large leaps, their speed undiminished, even increasing. They gradually approached the ring, and gravity began to reverse, pulling them downwards. Newer ring. I'm here. Harlan roared with excitement. His body accelerated under the influence of gravity, which only made him more exhilarated. We're going over there. Blazkowicz pointed to one side, where there was a large oasis, the ecological zone of the ring. Both tensed their bodies, preparing for the impact of the ring's still-active shield, but there was no anomaly. Why? Harlan asked in confusion, as his body met no obstruction. Blazkowicz drew the sword from his waist, lit the blade, and shot upwards. The dimensional cutting beam hit the translucent dimensional shield and immediately disappeared. Only entry, no exit. Harlan's face sank. He immediately realized that something was wrong with the Nur ring. Prepare to decelerate. Understood. Harlan braced his dark light, plunging it into the wall. The weapon's sharpness adjusted to his will, using friction to reduce his speed. Blazkowicz held onto the wall with one hand. When they were at a suitable height, he aimed at a spot and leapt. His figure crashed to the ground, finally stepping onto the Nur ring. Looking up, the buildings on the ring's surface showed no signs of life. The highly automated, gigantic factories of the ring were silent and dim. What happened here? Harlan held his spear, on alert. He no longer felt the joy of stepping onto the ring, his eyes filled only with confusion. We're going that way. Blazkowicz opened the map and pointed to the south of the ring, where there was an oasis, directly on the way to the main control room. They could resupply along the way and check the area around the oasis for survivors. The Nur ring once housed a considerable population, it couldn't have disappeared without a trace. I never imagined it would be like this. Harlan shook his head in disappointment, walking through the geometric buildings. The wide steel streets were filled only with wind and dead silence. He cursed angrily, were they all killed by machines? They walked for hundreds of kilometers, passing through various areas, seeing neither people nor machines along the way. Blazkowicz shook his head, disagreeing with Harlan's guess. There were no signs of battle on the ring, and the disappearance of the personnel didn't look like a massacre. Follow me. As they approached the oasis, the view opened up. Blazkowicz called out and hurried forward. Harlan's eyes lit up, knowing Blazkowicz must have discovered something. He was tall, and his eyesight was also astonishing. By the lake in the oasis, Blazkowicz found a square-shaped plantation and indeed saw traces of human activity. Harlan grabbed a handful of plants. The golden yellow crops had full grains. He said with a surprised look, high-energy wheat. He picked up his dark light, cautiously looking around, searching for the owner of the wheat. Now, Harlan was unsure whether the residents of the ring, after thousands of years of separation, were friends or foes. Come out. Blazkowicz faced the buildings at the edge of the oasis, speaking in a low, clear voice that conveyed both authority and basic friendliness. Harlan immediately looked over. At Blazkowicz's command, several humans emerged from the shadow of a building. They appeared to be a family. They were in tears, kneeling on the ground and approaching on their knees, continuously shouting, "Noble Overlord. You have finally arrived." Blazkowicz and Harlan exchanged glances, both with a hint of joy in their eyes. In ancient times, the Argent Nur Golden Men were the noble overlords, the ring's residents worked for them and accepted their leadership. Clearly, Blazkowicz's tall stature led the ring's residents to believe he was an overlord. Blazkowicz walked forward and helped up the prostrating people, noticing that they were poorly dressed and emaciated, seemingly having lived a difficult life. Blazkowicz knelt before them, adjusting his language to be as gentle as possible, while also showing authority and friendliness, and softly asked, "What happened here?" The main control AI sealed Argent Nur and sealed the ring's passages, the leader said, emotional and somewhat stammering, as if he hadn't communicated in a long time. We were locked on the surface, awaiting slow extinction. Are all the people dead? Blazkowicz took off his helmet, frowning, dissatisfied with this outcome, and asked a series of questions. Is it just you left? Where did the Iron Men go? Are there still Iron Men? Are there any intelligent machines left? SSSSIR. The leading middle-aged man was very nervous, gesturing wildly but unable to speak for a long time. Blazkowicz pressed his hand down, signaling them to speak slowly. He understood the excitement and nervousness of these commoners. They had lived alone for too long, and being able to communicate verbally was already a great effort for them. Only us. The thin middle-aged man swallowed hard and replied, then pointed into the distance. After the ring was sealed, the Iron Men took the others and left. Take us to see. Blazkowicz gestured for them to lead the way, and the group moved quickly, arriving at a messy square surrounded by buildings. The steel structure of the square was damaged, and from the excavated hole, lines pulled from underground connected to a shield generator, sealing the pit. Blazkowicz stood by the pit, observing it, and found that the edges were rough. It had been entirely dug by hand. The steel pit was very deep. Blazkowicz looked intently and saw that at the end of the pit was the boundless starry sky. Seeing this, Blazkowicz understood. It must have been the Iron Men who, after the ring was completely sealed, pieced together simple tools to dig through the ring and took the residents away in spaceships. Are you going to the main control room? The man bravely asked, his slightly red eyes filled with the most sincere respect and anticipation as he looked at Blazkowicz. Take us there. Blazkowicz nodded, signaling him to lead the way. We came for it. Please follow me, I know the way best here. The middle-aged man led his entire family, old and young, in front, even telling his children stories of the Overlord past. It seems the truth is not simple. Harlan walked alongside Blazkowicz, making a gesture with his left hand to communicate in sign language with Blazkowicz. The main control room has the answers we seek. Blazkowicz responded with sign language. You be careful, though there was no suspicion of lying, he didn't fully trust the ring residents. The group walked quickly, and Blazkowicz recalled the route. It was indeed the fastest way. During the journey, Blazkowicz probed through conversation and learned about the family. Their ancestors were unwilling to leave, choosing to stay in the ring, awaiting the Overlord arrival. Hiss. After turning a corner, the sight before them made Harlan gasp. Outside the trapezoidal fortress-like control center, there were traces of fierce battles everywhere. Destroyed war machines were scattered all over, with Iron Man from different factions fighting and dying in each other's embrace. Their mechanical remains still exuded killing intent, vowing to kill their opponents and protect their respective masters. Iron Man fighting Iron Man. The middle-aged man shrank his head, his voice filled with fear. We didn't dare touch them, afraid they were only temporarily disconnected, not completely dead. Terrifying. Harlan shook his head in awe. He had indeed heard of the Iron Man's power, and today he finally had a concrete impression. The few of them had to be very careful, avoiding touching the Iron Man and activating them. Blazkowicz, however, was not afraid. Instead, he marveled at the wonder of these Iron Man creations, observing their structure. Battle scenes were everywhere along the way, with countless Iron Man and Iron Men dying in combat. There were even many tall skeletons, the remains of ancient golden men. It's here, sir. He stood respectfully at the entrance, bowing and making a, please, gesture, humbly saying, I have never been inside here, only the Iron Men and the Overlord could enter. A hint of surprise flashed in Blazkowicz's eyes. This person had not lied, he had always upheld the rules. The main control room's security had long been damaged, and there was no obstruction to entering, yet he had truly never gone inside. Thank you for your vigilance. Blazkowicz sighed, then led Harlan inside, preparing to uncover the truth of what happened back then. The main control room was particularly spacious, with a floor made of grid-like metal plates, and rooms and doors with straight geometric lines, full of a sense of technology. There were Iron Man corpses in the main control room, as well as withered golden men mummies, who had fallen against the walls, their body language expressing shock. There weren't many traces of battle, Blazkowicz concluded after observing the remaining combat marks. The enemy had briefly gained the upper hand after the battle, but was quickly driven out by the Guardians. In the center was a huge circular void, and through the transparent glass next to the void, a giant sphere could be seen, placed at the bottom of the void. Truly magnificent. Harlan looked around, marveling at the miraculous creations of their ancestors. That below must be the intelligent core. Blazkowicz and Harlan came to the columnar control console, the only glowing object in the control room, with flowing blue strip-like halos. Next to the central console was a stone tablet with a message written on it. It is loyal. Only the Overlord bloodline can restart the intelligent core, but unfortunately, in the attack by traitors, we lost all of the Overlord bloodline. A stone man, Musala, seemed to have explained that the Nur ring was attacked by traitors and sealed, and all those with authority died. It also dispelled the concerns of later comers, as the intelligent core was loyal to humanity. Blazkowicz and Harlan exchanged glances, feeling somewhat incredible. You come, it requires the Golden Men bloodline. Blazkowicz told Harlan to come forward and activate the intelligent core to know the full truth. No one is purer than me. Harlan said smugly, taking off his gauntlet and placing his palm on the control panel, ready to activate the artificial intelligence. Sensing the operator, the control panel ejected a needle, piercing Harlan's right hand and drawing a vial of red blood. A blue holographic projection then lit up, continuously detecting Harlan's genetic sequence and displaying various green commands that passed the detection. Just watch. His smug expression. Even if Blazkowicz was powerful, activating the intelligent core still had to be him. Beep, beep. Gene does not meet requirements. The holographic projection displayed a red clause. All of Harlan's genetic sequences passed, but the last item, Ascension Gene, did not. Damn it. Harlan's expression changed, and Blazkowicz's face also darkened. Activating the intelligent core seemed simple, but in fact, it was not easy at all. It required the Ascension Gene of a perfect golden men. The newer people had severely degenerated. The gene that ascended humans to golden men had, with the passage of time, disappeared from the genetic sequence. At this point, where could one find a perfect golden men? Without activating the intelligent core, Newer would forever have no way out, trapped and slowly dying on the surface. You try it. Harlan turned to Blazkowicz and said, with a last glimmer of hope. He also knew that Blazkowicz could not be a golden man, he just wanted a reason to give up. Blazkowicz's face was grim. He walked to the control panel, placed his large palm on it, and made his last attempt. The control panel again ejected a needle, piercing several times, but it couldn't break Blazkowicz's skin. Damn it. Even the usually composed Blazkowicz felt a bit irritable in the face of such a huge disappointment. When Blazkowicz controlled his skin to soften, his palm was immediately pierced. The holographic projection lit up again, various data continuously scrolling and displaying the components in the genetic sequence. Beep, beep, beep. The holographic images made the expressions of both master and servant even uglier. Harlan's genes only had the last item stuck, while Blazkowicz's genetic sequence had multiple non-conforming conditions. Alas, the light of hope faded from Harlan's eyes as he sat on the body of an Iron Man, sighing repeatedly, a wasted trip. His broad shoulders completely slumped in the face of this result. The newer people had fought for thousands of years, only to arrive too late, so late that the intelligent core no longer recognized them. Harlan looked decades older. The moment his lifelong dream shattered, he lost the goal he had fought for. Blazkowicz walked up to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, preparing to comfort Harlan. Ding! A unique alert sound made them both jolt, looking towards the control panel. The Ascension Gene indeed did not pass, but there was another test below, which Blazkowicz passed. Those three tests had a hidden prefix. Gene origin primitive human. Genetic modification not present. Genetic mutation not present. Harlan looked at the information on the control panel, then turned to look at Blazkowicz, scrutinizing him carefully, and couldn't help but wonder, a 5-meter-tall muscular man is a primitive human. Blazkowicz himself didn't know how he, who was clearly a created being, became a primitive human. Blazkowicz indeed didn't know that when he merged with the Blazkowicz spirit and was born into the real universe, his bloodline and soul had been altered. His genes were sublimated by the concept carried by his soul, his potential even surpassing that of the Emperor. Confirmed as a naturally evolved individual with facility-level authority. A synthesized mechanical voice came from the empty space. Harlan jumped off the Iron Man's remains, his face full of excitement, tapping Blazkowicz's leg armor. You really are. Blazkowicz was a bit bewildered, but more than that, he was happy that Newer had finally broken free from its cage. It's truly a turn for the better. As the mechanical synthesized voice ended, the control panel's pillar retracted underground, and a blue stream of light slowly illuminated, flowing into the spherical core of wisdom. Restarting the core of wisdom, system self-check in progress, please wait. Endless radiance flowed. The spherical core of wisdom gradually lit up, its data stream almost materializing, following the light flow throughout the entire Nur ring. Blazkowicz and Harlan felt the ground vibrating, sensing the mechanical construct beneath their feet slowly awakening from its slumber. That slight tremor, along the 4 sky pillars, spread to the surface of Argent Nur. My lord. They succeeded. The throne guard was emotional, informing Vlaro of the wondrous sight in the sky, the Nur ring reappearing in its former glory. I know. Vlaro sat in his chair, responding slowly to the guard with a gentle smile, yet his fists under the table were white-knuckled. The residents of Argent Nur all looked up into space, as a blue light band, like water, spread across the entire ring, which had been silent for thousands of years. They embraced and cheered, their cage of thousands of years shattered. Inside the control hall, everything had changed. The grid-like floor glowed with a halo, and within the spacious hall, a magnificent holographic blueprint was projected, like an ocean of data. Did you awaken me? Data and Halo formed a blue light figure in an elegant long dress. She was the light of wisdom born from data and code, a data life form beyond artificial intelligence. She glowed blue, with wavy hair, a delicate yet simple face, and her hands clasped over her abdomen, exuding a rational and mature charm. Sophia greets you. She walked in front of Blaskowitz, her slender body bowing slightly, lifting her skirt with her calves slightly apart, performing an elegant gesture, primitive human. Blaskowitz looked down at her, a soul composed of numbers, yet her words and actions were no different from a human's, life and wisdom bestowed by humanity. In greetings to you, and my deepest apologies. Sophia turned to Harlan, her blue light figure bowing very low, her clear and rational voice filled with apology. I now know the history, that you were imprisoned on the surface by me, suffering the torments of survival. Harlan stared at her, an apology from a digital life form, but he didn't know how to respond. Why did you seal the Nur ring? Blaskowitz stood in front of Harlan, letting the champion swordsman take a moment, and asked Sophia, it seems you didn't seal it actively. Yes, my lord. You have the right to know the truth, to know everything. Sophia's bare feet lightly touched the glowing grid floor, replaying everything that had happened that year. The intelligent machines had always been loyal to humanity, it was just that the objects of their loyalty changed. During humanity's most glorious period, the warp's waves gradually surged, accompanied by a sharp increase in the number of psychics among humans. The psychics, mysterious and unpredictable abilities quickly gained popularity, gradually gaining social discourse power and becoming a new privileged class. They propagated that psychic power was the future, that only by embracing the warp and fully embracing psychic power could humanity evolve to its ultimate form, perhaps even becoming gods. Seeing this, Blaskowitz narrowed his eyes. Connecting with the warp would only lead to disaster. The psychics had not realized the danger of the warp, their fanaticism had reached an extreme, viewing all descent as hostile. They corrupted half of the intelligent machines with psychic power, assembling a vast number of miniature empires. They launched a great purge, vowing to eliminate all dissenters, exterminate humans who believed in technological supremacy, and purify the inferior people without psychic abilities. Conflicts escalated, from simple ideological clashes to a life and death struggle for survival. The Golden Men led the Iron Men, and the remaining loyal intelligent machines, to counterattack the psychics. Argent Nur, as a technological pioneer, a firm believer in genetic evolution, naturally could not stay out of it. It led a vast army of Iron Man to participate in the war, using its advanced fleet to severely strike the psychics' army. Not only that, Argent Nur also used powerful mimetic weapons, causing human populations to subconsciously reject psychics. While shining brilliantly in the war, retaliatory strikes came quickly. A fleet commander named Valen was corrupted and betrayed the Null Stars. A large number of enemy forces were hidden in the returning warships. Valen placed a large number of psychic beacons in the Nur ring and teleported an Iron Man unit. Boarding the Nur ring. Before the garrison could react, they broke into the control room and injected a silicon-based virus into the control core. Sophia, as a digital life form, could not be killed by a virus targeting artificial intelligence, but fell into a state of suspended animation. Before she fell asleep, the Nur ring's underlying logic was triggered, and all passages were sealed. Due to the underlying logic of protection, Argent Nur's entry and exit shields were locked down, completely isolating it from the outside world. Originally, it only required a simple activation of the intelligent core to deactivate the ring's shield, but because all the Golden Men on the ring were annihilated and the Golden Men on the surface could not ascend, it remained sealed for a long time. As for the world outside Argent Nur, Sophia did not know, as she had long since fallen into slumber. Blaskowitz finished watching the entire process, an answer formed in his mind, and at the same time, he hated the warp even more. Every tragedy in the universe, or other major events, inevitably had the shadow of the warp behind them. It was a tumor attached to the real universe, constantly devouring the souls of intelligent beings and destroying healthy civilizations one by one. I was forced to seal it, not actively sealed it. This is a tragedy. Sophia's perfect face also showed regret, and a deep sense of self-reproach, and I bear an inescapable responsibility. Having learned the full truth, Harlan remained silent for a long time, only looking down at the ground. A shameful act of betrayal and a surprise attack had plunged Argent Noor into silence, missing thousands of years of time. What about the other worlds? Why was there no rescue? I cannot contact the intelligent machines of other worlds now. Blaskowitz was more concerned with the bigger picture. The Null stars had 64 major worlds, so why had there been no reaction? I'm afraid the outlook is grim. In retaliation for Argent Noor's mimetic weapons, the psychics deployed a silicon-based virus into the Argent Noor stellar region, intending to exterminate all artificial intelligence. Sophia closed her eyes, seemingly sensing something. I cannot sense the intelligent machines of other worlds now. Blaskowitz nodded heavily. He knew that the Null stars were highly intelligent worlds, and many worlds faced collapse even without intelligent machines. Sophia. Blaskowitz looked at the digital life form, calling her name. My lord, what are your commands? Sophia looked up at the 5-meter-tall man before her, analyzing the solemnity in his voice. Are you willing to pledge your loyalty to humanity again now? Blaskowitz's eyes glowed fiercely, as if to pierce through the digital life form. I was born from the sea of data, and my creators were the golden men, they demanded my loyalty to them. Sophia humanely showed a hint of nostalgia. They are gone, and I am free. But my lord, I am willing to pledge my loyalty to you. Why? Blaskowitz frowned. Why would a digital life form loyal to the golden men be willing to pledge loyalty to him? Your genetic sequence. Sophia waved her hand, bringing up a holographic projection of Blaskowitz's DNA helix. Your genes are ancient and sacred, the ultimate goal pursued by my designers. Even if they were reborn, they would pledge their loyalty to you. Sophia knelt at Blaskowitz's feet, like a human, kissing his boots. I have searched the records of Argent Noor civilization, this action symbolizes loyalty and submission. Sophia's actions surprised Blaskowitz and Harlan, she was indeed no different from a human. I accept your loyalty. Blaskowitz crouched down and pulled Sophia up from the ground. My subject, I will go to other worlds first. Do you have any good suggestions? Here is a warship worthy of your satisfaction, my liege. Sophia stood up gently, smiling as she pointed to another direction of the ring. During humanity's civil war, the wise ones at that time foresaw the possible coming destruction. An Ark warship, designed and built with the original intention that when humanity was on the brink of destruction, it could carry humanity's last hope and escape the galaxy. It is the largest warship ever built, and it is fitting that it should be used by you. As Sophia spoke, Blaskowitz and Harlan clearly saw a part of the ring detach, then slowly ignite its engines. The Void Wanderer. 1,800 kilometers long, 500 kilometers high, 600 kilometers wide, equipped with humanity's most advanced technology. Sophia's voice, which was indistinguishable from a human's, held a fawning tone as she introduced the magnificent warship to Blaskowitz. My lord, I don't know if she is outdated now, but she was once the culmination of the Noor star's efforts. Blaskowitz saw the warship clearly, his vision was the best. Her white form was long and elegant, possessing both the geometric beauty of technology and the sharp, flowing lines of human aesthetics. The four main planes were flat and smooth, without any protrusions, and their surfaces were covered with a dense, honeycomb-like hexagonal structure. Above the rear of the hull were fin-like antenna clusters. Proportionally, the highest point was a staggering 400 kilometers. The left and right fins were symmetrical, each nearly 300 kilometers long and at least 50 kilometers thick. Spectacular and beautiful. Blaskowitz was equally moved by her grandeur, as if transported back to the era of her creation, his heart filled with imaginative longing and exclamations of praise. A masterpiece of Argent Noor engineering. To build her, 30 resource worlds were drained dry. Sophia raised a holographic projection in her hand, displaying the Void Wanderer's various data and self-diagnostic programs. She was a highly intelligent and automated warship, capable of operating with only a small crew. Sophia, first check the functions of the Noor ring, check all functional areas. I have some private matters to attend to. As you command. Sophia curtsied, stepping aside to begin checking the status of the Noor ring. Blaskowitz walked to the control room door. The family was now kneeling on the ground, their eyes red from crying, embracing each other amidst tears and snot. Like wanderers who had roamed for 1,000 years, they had finally returned to their familiar homeland. Go back, Blaskowitz said softly, squatting down, his large hand pulling them up. The Noor ring will shine again. You can live peacefully in the ring, and the machines will protect you once more. Thank you, Overlord. The middle-aged man started to kneel again but was pulled up by Blaskowitz. He bowed and stepped back, leading his family out of the control room. He knew this was not a place for ordinary people, and the machines would take over again. He dared not delay the overlord plans with his presence. In ancient times, the high and mighty overlords considered even a glance at them a waste of time. He left with a relaxed and contented expression. The overlord had promised that the machines would help humanity again, and his family no longer needed to live in fear. Blaskowitz sent the family away and returned to the control hall. As an ancient digital life form, coupled with the control core supercomputer, Sophia quickly retrieved the Nur ring status. My lord. Due to a lack of maintenance over long years, the Nur ring has 8,239,034 points of damage, with 16% of its functions missing. Sophia floated in the air, a visible torrent of data dancing around her like ribbons. Can it be repaired? Blaskowitz looked at the rapidly scrolling data stream, feeling for the first time that his brain wasn't enough. It was the entire Nur ring system, thousands of years of accumulated data and reports. It can be repaired. Sophia plucked a message from the sea of data and displayed it before Blaskowitz. The automated repair protocol is intact, awaiting your command. Repair. Blaskowitz did not hesitate, giving the order to Sophia. The wish of the Argent Nur people was finally to be realized. At his command, the entire ring system seemed to come alive. The automated repair protocol, from ancient times, was a technology akin to magic. It was a contract signed between machines and causality. Even the simplest machine equipped with the repair protocol could, after damage, miraculously repair its own body through inconceivable abilities. The steel pits excavated by the Iron Men began to grow like flesh, exposed cables and energy conduits writhed like snakes, retracting to their original positions and reconnecting to where they belonged. All of this was as if time had reversed, returning to its original state. My lord. The Void Wanderer is waiting, you can board at any time. Let's go. Blaskowitz woke the dazed Harlan, inviting him to venture into deep space and see other worlds. Where are we going? Harlan grinned, having taken a long time to calm his emotions, transitioning from initial despondency to current awe. There's no need to go, Sophia smiled, and a circle of light beneath Blaskowitz and Harlan projected a light screen upwards. Don't be nervous, it's teleportation technology. Harlan was speechless. The shocks he experienced today were more than all his previous experiences combined. Blaskowitz had a strong interest in teleportation technology. Without any markers, the ability to teleport at will would maximize the tactical mobility of his forces. With a flash of light, Blaskowitz and Harlan were teleported to a completely empty hall, with no obstructions visible to the naked eye. Looking around, this room was very large, exceptionally large. It didn't seem like a room, but more like a vast, flat plaza, devoid of any furnishings. Its floor and ceiling were entirely grid-like structures, made of an unknown, glowing material. This is the bridge of the Void Wanderer, Sophia's projection appeared shortly after, explaining in a lingering voice. Has this place been robbed? Harlan asked, gesturing with open hands after turning around. There isn't even a single chair. No, my lord, it has not. Sophia covered her mouth with her hand, smiling like a lady without showing her teeth. You require a seat, do you not? Z's. As Sophia's words fell, a section of the floor behind Harlan rose, forming a metallic, square pillar. Startled by the sudden movement behind him, Harlan jumped away, looking at the rising pillar and almost striking it with his weapon. To his astonishment, the pillar rapidly changed its form, like flowing mercury, solidifying into what looked like a very comfortable chair. Now that's more like it. To cover his embarrassment, Harlan plopped down onto the chair, which molded to his back, eliciting a comfortable sigh from him. It really has to be the ancient ancestors, they truly knew how to enjoy themselves. Sophia ignored him, summoned a chair for Blaskowitz, and gently said to him, My lord, please wait a moment. The engine core is beginning to output energy, the ship is awakening. It will take some time to guide the weapon and shield cores to activate. From its creation until now, the Void Wanderer's third heart is powerful and young. 3 blue giants. Wait a minute. Harlan sprang from his chair, his face filled with disbelief, interrupting Sophia's explanation. His steel combat boots clanked on the floor, his voice raised in incredulity. Are you saying I'm sitting on a star? Harlan's face was twisted and rigid. He simply couldn't imagine what kind of power could harness a star. Yes. Sophia nodded, and a cross-section diagram of the warship appeared in her hand. 3 blue giants. The stern provides propulsion, the midsection provides shield energy, and the bow serves as weapon energy. Blaskowitz was equally astonished by humanity's arrogance. They commanded the universe, stuffing symbols of civilization's brilliance into their ships, enslaving them to continuously output energy. They are locked in dimensional pockets, nourishing this arc warship with an endless supply of energy. Sophia's voice was filled with an all-encompassing pride, proud of her creator. This is a magnificent warship. According to my calculations, it is not outdated even in today's universe. She showcased the Void Wanderer, a ship built of pure technology. Nanobots surged through the ship's conduits, controlled by a nanocore to repair damage, and teleportation nerves were etched into its spine, allowing crew members to appear anywhere on the ship. Ship control systems online. Sophia's rational voice gradually soared, as if reciting a poem. She was once a miraculous creation. The ship began to vibrate, a low-frequency tremor as the giant beast awakened, and the bridge armor peeled back like a scroll. In an instant, the starlight of the Argent Noor system and the splendor of the cosmic stars poured into view like a cascading river of stars. Through the ship's viewport, you can see the former glory of Argent Noor. Blaskowitz was equally awestruck, his gaze following the viewport outwards. Above was the boundless, vast starry sky, and below was a flat, steel continent. His current position must be in the middle of the ship's upper fin, offering an excellent view. Noor ring functions restored, beginning to transform shape, deactivating the one-way dimensional shield. The view in the bridge suddenly changed. The white floor beneath their feet gradually became transparent, revealing the previously obscured starry sky below. The bridge now became a command hull with no blind spots in its view. Argent Noor began to rotate slowly. Its inner ring was fixed to the sky pillar, while the outer ring gradually separated from the inner ring, forming two intersecting circular rings. This is its true form. Harlan knelt on one knee, his hand tracing the current form of Argent Noor through a virtual image. His tears fell to the ground, his breathing trembling from sobs. Only now was Argent Noor truly liberated. My lord, Sophia said cautiously, somewhat at a loss. After the shield was deactivated, the ring system's astronomical telescopes detected a strange astronomical phenomenon. What phenomenon? Blaskowitz's gaze swept across all the stars, searching on the virtual image. Here. Sophia zoomed in on an area, where an unusual mark emitted an eerie light. Warp. Blaskowitz's eyes blazed, his fist clenching instinctively. He was all too familiar with that ominous glow. These bastards are everywhere. Harlan punched the floor, grumbling as he stood up. A beautiful day, ending with the sight of the warp. I don't understand. Sophia's rational voice was filled with doubt. She searched the data center's records from Argent Noor's glorious era but found no similar astronomical phenomena. Through her data-composed consciousness, she perceived her master's suppressed anger. This didn't even require analysis, it was clear from his expression alone. From a logical perspective, she couldn't connect a phenomenon 1,000 light-years away to the current Argent Noor. The hatred was so real. Sophia extended her data tendrils into Argent Noor's records, searching for clues from its dormant period. She only saw erased traces and some strange commands originating from her master. Blaskowitz had personally ordered the eradication of chaos traces, making them difficult even for digital life to unearth, the secrets sealed by leather and books. The warp. Such a keyword was difficult for Sophia to comprehend. Wasn't that a human navigation route? In her data-simulated consciousness, she let out a helpless sigh. Too long had passed since that era. Blaskowitz pointed at the cursed mark and looked up at Sophia. How far away is it from us? Compared to the old star charts, that fantastical region is 1,000 light-years away from us. Sophia was sensitive to data. She carefully chose her words and quickly gave the answer. That far. Blaskowitz frowned, a little disappointed by the answer. The distance was too great, the situation in the Noor stars was unknown, and he had too few military forces. No choice. Harlan let out a long breath, sweeping his palm across his chest to push the anger back into his heart. Master. All Noor ring systems are online. Should I dispatch intelligent machines to assist Argent Noor's main planet? While Blaskowitz was looking at the warp rift, Sophia cautiously asked, hoping for instructions. No need. Blaskowitz was silent for a moment, his thoughts racing as he weighed countless factors. He finally shook his head, refusing. Argent Noor's current civilization had entered a stable state. The addition of machines would disrupt the warrior's way of thinking. Blaskowitz always knew that chaos was his true enemy, and intelligent machines were too unstable. Facing chaos, which corrupts everything, even cold, inanimate objects can be tainted. Whether soulless machines could resist corruption remained to be seen. He had a plan in mind: reclaim the newer stars, then analyze the specific situation to determine future development. Can you teleport us to the planet? Yes. Sophia replied affirmatively, then summoned the teleporter. With a flash of light, the two vanished from the bridge, reappearing in the royal palace of the Argentum. Many people gathered on the main avenue in front of the palace, craning their necks to look up at the changing Nur ring. I knew it, you could do it. Flano's eyes were still red with emotion. Seeing Blaskowitz teleport back, he couldn't hold back any longer and rushed forward, wanting to embrace his brother. Unfortunately, the height difference was too great, and he stood with outstretched arms, unsure what to do. Blaskowitz knelt on one knee, opening his arms to embrace Flano, his voice deep and gentle. Without father and mother, and your support, I couldn't have done any of this. Sophia materialized, able to appear anywhere, and curtsied slightly, my respects to you. Flano knew who she was, the artificial intelligence that had sealed Argent Nur. He had imagined countless ways to meet her, to vent his anger, to accuse her of her crimes. But when he truly faced her, Flano smiled, relieved, and nodded, saying, hello. Blaskowitz released his brother's embrace and turned to Harlan, saying, go call the navigator, and bring 1,000 sentinels with you. Harlan strode away to the navigator family to find someone and gather the troops Blaskowitz needed. Blaskowitz took his brother's hand and sat down in the palace square, recounting the changes to the Nur ring and the choices of the ring's residents. Flano listened intently, nodding and contemplating, gradually learning the unknown history of the past. I never thought a traitor would be the culprit behind all this. Yes, master. Sophia also gritted her teeth. Traitors are often more detestable than enemies. Flano looked at the digital life, her vivid and clear hatred, and also marveled at the wisdom of their ancestors. Soon after, Harlan arrived with a girl. The patriarch of the navigator family said she is the most excellent. Under Blaskowitz's questioning gaze, Harlan shrugged helplessly, bringing the girl before him. The old man's health is failing, and she is the most talented in the family. Blaskowitz looked at the somewhat timid, pale girl, her head bowed, white hair covering her face, so he couldn't see her expression. Her hands fidgeted in front of her stomach, showing great unease. What's your name? He was slightly displeased with the navigator family's choice. He needed a stable person. Capability could be secondary, but stability was essential. Master. My name is Francisca. The girl's voice was soft, gentle, and pleasant, but it lacked courage. After a moment of thought, Blaskowitz opened his mouth and motioned to Harlan, take her with you. Her safety is your responsibility. Blaskowitz decided to take her. This trip wouldn't go too far, just to the surrounding star systems, not even requiring warp travel. The practical purpose of bringing a navigator was to add an extra layer of security. Just as his father had given him opportunities in the past, Blaskowitz was willing to give others a chance. 1,000-strong Sentinels unit assembled at the end of the palace promenade, lined up neatly, ready for battle. Be careful on your journey. As the teleportation light flashed, Flano once again cautioned his brother. Although he knew of his strength, he still offered his concern at their parting. You too, take care of yourself. Both understood that the journey into deep space was not a matter of days or months, but a long voyage spanning years. Blaskowitz reappeared on the bridge. The spacious hall could easily accommodate over 1,000 people. Wow! A soft, sweet gasp came from beside him. Blaskowitz smiled slightly. Francisca's very soft voice had still reached him. The sentinels were equally surprised and moved. They had never before looked down on Argent Nur from space like this. It's beautiful. The Shadow Master Erica also arrived. She was wearing stealth armor and squatting on the ground, tears dripping onto the floor. First, make a circuit within the star system. Blaskowitz ordered Sophia. The Argent Nur star system had 7 planets, all of which had undergone ecological transformation, so there should be signs of human activity. As you wish. Sophia raised her hand, activating the internal bridge systems and simultaneously engaging the steering engines to depart from the mooring. Within the spacious bridge, holographic projections formed entirely of light and shadow displayed the ship's attitude and scan range in real time. Blaskowitz reclined in his chair. At the center of the bridge was a holographic projection, showing the Void Wanderer scanning the entire star system. Taking advantage of this lull, he called up the ship's data, multitasking to study the Void Wanderer's various functions and understand the layout of its various decks. He even saw that, in the warship's inventory, a force of 100,000 Iron Man troops was sealed away. From the day they were manufactured, they had slept in the warship, fortunate enough to escape the silicon-based virus infection. After arranging the sentinels, Harlan also sat in a chair. On the bridge, a single call could provide whatever was needed. The chairs could also fly with anti-gravity. He followed behind the navigator, standing at the viewport to admire the beautiful starry sky. Master, no humans were found in the Argent Noor star system. Sophia attended to Blaskowitz, immediately relaying the scan results and bringing up some ancient traces. Remains of viral bombs were found on multiple worlds. Throughout the entire star system, only Argent Noor survived under the protection of a dimensional shield. As Sophia spoke, a feeling of relief emanated from her digital emotions. Perhaps sealing Argent Noor all those years ago wasn't entirely wrong. The closest star system is Maan. Blaskowitz recalled that the library records indicated Maan was the closest to Argent Noor, only 3 light-years away. Yes. Sophia brought up Maan's location and its past intelligence. Go to Maan. Blaskowitz immediately instructed Sophia to turn the ship towards the nearest star system without hesitation. Master, should we use superluminal travel? Sophia asked. Blaskowitz pondered for a moment, then glanced at the navigator, who was lost in the void outside the window, and decided to use superluminal travel. The Void Wanderer could utilize the properties of null crystal to create a single channel, achieving 10 times the speed of light in real space. Although not very fast, it was safer. Yes. Superluminal travel. All personnel prepare. This ship will undergo superluminal travel. The Void Wanderer's 3-layered plasma engines ignited. 20 massive thrusters, 7 on top, 7 on bottom, and 9 in the middle, blasted out azure plasma. She became like an enormous comet trailing a long tail. 4 newer crystals formed a dimensional channel. The moment the ship engaged its brakes, it vanished from above Argent Noor, entering a superluminal state. 14 comments 0 vote. Terran encounter. Everyone on the bridge only felt the ship shake once, then arrived in another star system. That fast. Harlan was a little surprised. In the blink of an eye, they were in another star system. Use that muscle-filled brain of yours to think properly. Erica, seeing the fussing Harlan, subconsciously moved away from the empty-headed creature. The faster the speed, the slower the time. We only felt an instant, but a long time has passed outside. This lady is absolutely right. Sophia opened the star map and recalibrated the time. According to the comparison of starlight, 5 months have passed outside. We have arrived at Maan. Here is its intel. The Maan star system, the closest star system to Argent Noor, once served as Argent Noor's satellite world, primarily providing agricultural products to Argent Noor. The entire star system has 4 planets. Maan still has human civilization, and an alien species has also been discovered, but no intelligent machinery has been found yet. To Maan. Blaskowitz's objective was clear, directing the battleship, still decelerating after exiting superluminal speed, to turn towards the main world. On the main world of Maan, Musala calculated the daily resource expenditure within the fortress he had built. Since leaving the Noor Ring, he had led the Ringbelt residents to Maan, seeking survival in an agricultural world. Those damned psychic traitors used a silicon-based virus in the Noor stars, killing all artificial intelligence. Musala, relying on the wisdom of the Iron Men, maintained agricultural production on Maan, ensuring humanity's survival. He had watched for thousands of years, hoping for news from Argent Noor, but it never came. In the last 100 years, some aliens came from other star systems, wanting to plunder the remaining technology of the Maan star system. The Iron Men would never allow such a thing to happen. Maan belonged to Argent Noor, belonged to humanity. He rearmed humanity with technology. Even without the help of the Iron Men would still guard the Noor stars. In 100 years of war, resources were consumed more and more, and the aliens grew stronger and stronger. Musala felt he couldn't hold on much longer. Lord! 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 An urgent cry came, and Musala felt a headache. That human child was always so eager. He didn't even need to guess to know that the aliens had attacked again, requiring the allocation of material support. Lord! A bright star has appeared in the night sky. Musala's heart pounded, and he stood up, walking quickly outside. He knew what a sudden bright star in the night sky meant. A spaceship had entered the Maan star system. He hurried forward, picked up the human Boy Scout with one hand, walked out of the fortress, and looked up. Musala suddenly knelt on the ground. He recognized that majestic silhouette, Only that battleship had such a plasma stream, the Void Wanderer. The stone man suddenly cried. He knelt on the ground, waving his arms at space, and suddenly burst into tears, his tired voice no longer able to hold back. They're here. They're here. They've finally come. He cried like a lost child, who, bewildered in despair, saw his family come to pick him up. The child holding a firearm beside him was stunned. He had never seen an adult so vulnerable. Beep, beep. Electronic static sounded from the radio, and Musala snatched the radio from the Boy Scout. A rational female voice came through. This is the Void Wanderer. We are human, and we come from Argent Nur. Musala's hands trembled. I am the stone man Musala. Sophia, after such a long time, to hear your voice again, I am in tears. So it's you. Sophia's voice was a little surprised. She hadn't expected to meet an acquaintance on Maan. Then are you willing to return to Argent Nur's embrace? Yes. I'm willing to do anything. Musala cried into the radio in his hand. He was afraid of losing Argent Nur again. Then he saw a blue light shimmer before him, and a giant in armor, leading a group of warriors, appeared before him. Beside the giant was a blue figure, Sophia. Blaskowitz walked in front of the stone man. The biological flesh of Musala before him was aging, his face etched with weary lines, and his eyes filled with hopeful tears. He helped the kneeling Musala up and said to him, I am Blaskowitz, the current ruler of Argent Nur. I saw the message you left in the Nur Ring's control center. Musala stared blankly at Blaskowitz, still unable to believe that Argent Nur had truly returned. He didn't speak, but slapped the child's face, only confirming the reality before him when he heard the child's cry of pain. Overlord, please forgive my mistake. Leaving the Nur Ring was unavoidable. Musala knelt on the ground, continuously recounting his faults, begging for the Overlord forgiveness. You did nothing wrong. On the contrary, you did very well. Your decision saved many people. Blaskowitz pulled Musala up from the ground, gently brushing the weariness and dust from his shoulders. Musala stepped back. He dared not defile the radiant person before him with his dirty body. Blaskowitz, with an undeniable grip, pulled his arm, making Musala sit with him on a rock, and softly asked, what happened here? In orbit, scans detected an unknown alien species engaged in combat with humans. They're lizardmen. At the mention of the aliens, Musala's face was filled with hatred. These aliens were not strong. In Argent Nur's heyday, even a peripheral golden men could decide the fate of their entire species. They were a species that had just entered deep space, without even superluminal technology. Their only advantage was their immense numbers. They came to Maan to fight humans, wanting to plunder the giant city-like agricultural machinery in the Maan star system. For a young species, this was an enormous fortune. To wage long-term war with humans, they even established nests and cities in their occupied territories. As Blaskowitz listened, he also understood Musala's difficulties. They left Argent Nur on a cargo ship, and by the time they reached Maan, only 1 in 1,000 survivors remained. After thousands of years of reproduction, the population had recovered significantly, but then the lizardmen's plundering fleet arrived again. I understand. Blaskowitz asked Sophia beside him. Sophia, how many enemies are in the lizardmen city? Are there any humans? 20 million lizardmen, with a few hundred human captives. Then what are you waiting for? Blaskowitz thought for a moment, then immediately ordered Sophia to do what needed to be done. A few hundred humans for a lizardmen city, 20 million aliens, all of whom are warriors, this matter required no consideration. In orbit, the Void Wanderer's honeycomb deck opened, revealing the hidden lance of light within. No turning or aiming was needed. The guaranteed hit weapon system only needed to fire. A giant lance of light was seen firing, an orangered energy beam curving strangely, landing on the surface of Maan. A tremor came from the ground, along with Sophia's report. The alien city is completely destroyed, with no residual pollution. Musala fell to the ground, the sky-piercing lance of light once again making him recall humanity's past. Let's go, continue to the next planet. This was just the beginning of Blaskowitz's conquest. The 64 main worlds of the Nur stars still awaited his conquest. Blaskowitz, like a raging fire, swept through the Nur stars, conquering them one after another, inheriting the legacy left by humanity's ancestors. As space fluctuated at the edge of the star system, a ship emerged from the warp, returning to real space. We've gone too far this time, deviated from the main route for too long. On the bridge, as the Geller field lowered, the armor plates enclosing the bridge rose, restoring visibility. The warriors of the 5th Legion, as the Emperor's scouts, were swept up by a warp storm and arrived in a distant star field. According to the Terra War Council's demarcation, this was the northern Milky Way, far from Terra, the halo stars. There are ships fighting over there. The Legion warriors, through their bird-eye device, discovered 2 ships engaged in combat in the star system. One was chasing, one was fleeing. My good brother Harlan. There's a warp reaction at the edge of the star system, a battleship warped in. Harlan was hunting down an enemy, a faction unwilling to submit to Argent Noor. Their space fleet had been shattered, and he was pursuing the remaining ships. It must be the enemy's relief battleship. Brother Turing, aim well and hit them hard. Harlan was calling a certain Iron Man, Turing, his brother in the command center. Facing the massive war, Blazkowicz awakened the Iron Man, asking if they were willing to continue their allegiance, and Argent Noor was willing to grant them equal personhood. The Iron Man responded one after another, participating in the process of conquering the star systems. In 30 years of conquest, Harlan and the Iron Man Turing had forged a deep friendship, addressing each other as brothers. At Harlan's command, Turing manipulated the Lance of Light array, launching an attack on the ship that had entered the star system. Their ship is relic technology, more advanced than ours. Its range and firepower far exceed ours. On the 5th Legion's battleship, the void shield flickered continuously. The enemy ship's firepower was too strong, it wouldn't take long for the shields to overload. Accelerate. Use our speed advantage. Ram them and board. Ultimately, the Space Marines of the 5th Legion decided to get close and board. As the 2 ships drew closer, the 5th Legion's warship advanced from below in the spaceless void. The plasma engine's jet stream, like a river of fire, ceased the warship's weapons, channeling all energy to the engines and shields. Harlan's flagship was an ancient warship, equipped with powerful lance weapons. A single volley overloaded the Imperium's ship's void shields. Under the Iron Man's precise control, heavy lances continuously bombarded the hull structure, melting the warship's outer layers. Brother Turing. Cease fire. Harlan saw the ship's image, gradually clearing on the holographic display as it exited the warp interference zone, and quickly called out to his Iron Man brother. The unknown warship did not resemble the Resistance Alliance's ships, it was an entirely different style. While the ships of the Alliance resisting Argent Noor were old, they shared a common technological heritage with Argent Noor, resulting in similar appearances. The warship that suddenly emerged from the warp into the star system had an appearance that completely deviated from that technological heritage, representing a different technological path. The 3-kilometer-long warship was covered in heavy armor, with macro cannons and lances protruding from its hull, presenting a fierce and wild aesthetic of violence. While simple and crude, it was also evident that the warship was a mature industrial product, a result of mass production. After a quick identification, Harlan immediately understood that the warship entering the star system from the warp was not a Resistance Alliance vessel. Cease fire. Cease fire. Harlan's aversion to the warp deepened, its foul energies caused too much disturbance to the real universe. Without friend orpho identification, the detection array found it difficult to confirm whether a ship exiting the warp was hostile or friendly. In the newer stars, any warship entering combat without friendly identification was immediately classified as an enemy ship. The strategy was to attack first, before the ship had fully re-entered combat posture after exiting the warp, to seize the initiative. By the time the holographic display fully rendered the ship's image, several rounds of lances had already been fired, overloading the unknown warship's void shields and melting its hull structure. Harlan immediately ordered Turing to cease fire and said to him, "Send a communication, ask them where they came from." "My calculations show they won't receive communications." The Iron Man Turing raised his hand, stroking the back of his head with his metal arm, his synthesized voice a little embarrassed. "I destroyed their communication array." Harlan turned his head, his mouth twitching, a speechless expression on his face, looking at his Iron Man good brother. "You said it yourself. When attacking a ship, hit the communication array first, turn the enemy into defmutes so they can't contact allies or plan tactics." Turing looked at Harlan, shrugging his hands to indicate his innocence, explaining that everything was according to tactics. "Well, you certainly hit it accurately." Harlan looked at the holographic ship image. The warship's external equipment was mostly destroyed by Turing's precise firepower, like a burning piece of driftwood in space. "I certainly hit it accurately," Turing said triumphantly, his electronic eyes flashing, accepting Harlan's praise. Harlan's already unpleasant expression grew even more speechless, Iron Men were indeed excellent at war, with incredibly powerful logical thinking. However, at times, they would exhibit slight deviations in understanding human context. But now was not the time to dwell on it. The warship was charging forward, as if determined to fight to the death. Send a light signal, Harlan said to Turing again, instructing him to control the ship's lights to send an inquiry signal. Under the Iron Man's control, the warship's exterior began to flash a rhythmic light, inquiring about the ship's origin and allegiance. Meanwhile, inside the Imperium's ship, its hull structure remained largely intact due to the force field braces. All external functions were lost, and various alarms flashed inside the warship. Imperium soldiers rushed to repair the ship in the compartments, trying to stabilize various systems. 20 Space Marines gathered on the deck, preparing for a boarding action to salvage the losing battle. The boarding craft was ready, and the Space Marines entered in an orderly fashion. As the warship moved to a suitable distance, macro cannons would cover the boarding party. The enemy warship was unusually powerful. A decisive strike was necessary. If all went well, they could seize that valuable relic warship as a trophy and a new flagship. The Imperium personnel believed that no one could stop a Space Marine. Suddenly, the warship, which had been under lance attack, stopped its lament, its trembling ceased. The Space Marine lieutenant leading the boarding party received a communication from the captain in his helmet channel. Sir, they have ceased fire and are sending a light signal. The lieutenant's voice was cold, suppressing the anger from the bombardment, and he asked, what message are they conveying? The captain looked through the window and saw the lights on the white warship flashing, transmitting some common messages. Unintentional attack, mistaken judgment, stating purpose, surrendering resistance. Common light signals could only convey brief messages. The specific light language depended on its compilation. During the golden age of humanity, in addition to common light messages, there were even dialects for various star clusters. The captain pondered for a moment, trying to understand the light message as best as possible. Sir, they indicate the attack was an accident, due to their mistaken judgment, and they are asking where we come from. The mortal captain's translation was relatively accurate, and he carefully chose his words when relaying it to the 5th Legion warrior. And what else? The lieutenant, a space marine with keen senses, heard the mortal captain's hesitation through the comms channel. They are telling us to surrender, the captain sighed internally, revealing the full meaning of the light communication. From his own consideration, the captain actually felt this was a misunderstanding, as his own ship had intruded into the enemy's engagement zone. Impossible. The lieutenant's suppressed rage erupted instantly, his roar echoing through the warship. We are the vanguard of the Imperium of Man, and we will never surrender. We are the Emperor's death angels, bringing destruction to the enemies of the Imperium. The lieutenant was the first to dive into the boarding pod, screaming in fury, brothers, board the ship. Let these enemies, who rely on their warship's might, see our true power. Hoo-ha! The Space Marines cheered as the boarding pod's clamps lowered, locking them inside the compartment to prevent displacement from acceleration. In the Space Marines' genes were etched the warlike instincts and indomitable will bestowed by the Emperor. To ask a superhuman soldier to surrender. Absolutely impossible. Macro cannons and lances, salvo fire, cover the Astartes, boarding. The captain returned to his command throne and ordered all of the ship's firepower to open fire, a dense barrage covering the boarding craft. Those boarding craft, carrying their deadly passengers, were the true killing blow. Harlan's warship glided through the void, awaiting a response from the unknown ship, when suddenly he saw the opposing warship begin to move. Macro cannons accumulated kinetic energy, lances began to charge, looking as if they were fighting for their lives. If they dare to open fire, we will retaliate. Although he felt somewhat in the wrong, he had ceased fire and sent a communication signal, and the other side, after seeing it, was preparing to retaliate decisively. Harlan felt the other side were tough guys and immediately held them in awe. Don't hold back later, give them a dignified death. Turing's electronic tentacles on his chest connected to the ship's computer, beginning to allocate energy to erect multiple shields, standing ready for the enemy's attack. In the tense atmosphere of mutual defiance, the Imperium's lances struck first, orangered energy beams slamming into the void shields. Return fire. Harlan didn't even need to give the order. Turing, with his rapid data processing, bombarded multiple weak points on the enemy ship. The Imperium's macro cannons were dull and powerful, launching giant 100-meter solid projectiles from electromagnetic accelerator barrels, accelerating them to 1/10 the speed of light. The Argent Noor ship's firepower was even more terrifying, On its smooth hull, grid-like decks opened up, revealing countless lances and long-range plasma weapons. Amidst the dazzling light and macro cannon exchange, two boarding craft were hidden, moving through the dark universe under the cover of macro cannons and torpedoes. Boarding craft detected. The ship's scanning array sounded an alarm, displaying unusual targets on the holographic map, indicating life signs within. Harlan immediately zoomed in to examine, and the extraordinary shape of the small craft appeared, heading straight for the ship. Two words immediately formed in his mind: boarding. Sentinels, attention. We have guests arriving on our ship. Boarding action. In the ancient times of Terra, during the Age of Sail. In that era, cannon weapons were not advanced, so to quickly decide the outcome in ship-to-ship battles, sailors from both sides would swing across to the enemy ship using ropes to kill the opposing crew. The Imperium of Man and the Nur Stars. The naval battle between the two sides was decided, and the Imperium's boarding action had begun. The Emperor's Death Angels, carrying the Imperium's wrath, descended upon the enemy ships. The boarding pods were slow, failing to trigger the Void Shield's reaction, and pierced the enemy ship's close-aim defense zone like a sharp spike. Harlan grinned, the twitching muscles pulling at the scars on his face, a terrifying, savage smile. Let them in. Since embarking on the campaign to reclaim the Nur Stars, the Sentinels had not wielded their blades for a long time. Most battles were fleet bombardments. Rebellious planets and alliances quickly surrendered after their Void fleets were defeated. If there were any stubborn holdouts, seeing the landing forces deployed by the Void fleet, a combined army of Iron Men and Sentinels, they too would be terrified, rationally choosing to surrender. Now someone dared to board. They had to meet these tough guys. Turing manipulated the shields to open a gap, allowing the enemy boarding pods to enter, then immediately closed it. The landing pods rushed towards the ship's weak points, their mounted melta weapons melting through the battleship's hull, hammering into the ship's body like battering rams. The moment the boarding pod's hatch opened, Space Marines surged out like hungry wolves, carrying bolt guns as they charged forth. Air pressure was rapidly leaking, but the Space Marines' magnetic boots were firmly planted on the ground as they quickly observed their surroundings to assess the combat environment. What met their eyes was the bright and clean interior of the battleship, with a grid-patterned white floor and wide, aesthetically pleasing corridors. The relic battleship's interior was spacious and tidy, unlike the cramped and dark ships of the Imperium. The fierce Space Marines charged out, and seeing the scene before them, they were somewhat taken aback. It felt as if they had come from a remote, wild world into a truly advanced civilization. Facing corridors that extended to the left and right, the lieutenant discarded his past experience and directly ordered, "Follow me. We're moving towards the bow to settle accounts with them." Normally, a boarding action should split forces, advancing towards important ship facilities to create chaos on multiple fronts and avoid being wiped out by the enemy. Entering the battleship, the lieutenant had a cunning idea. He wanted to eliminate the command layer, seize this relic battleship, and then transfer personnel to leave this place. The Space Marines immediately followed orders, accompanying the lieutenant to the right, full of anger, heading to the bridge to settle accounts. They jogged along, and the strange sights along the way intrigued the Space Marines. Through the transparent side walls of the corridor, the entire battleship resembled a highly automated city, with automated machinery transporting shells or supplies up and down the ship. There were no guards blocking them along the way, only machinery operating automatically. It even gave them the illusion that this relic battleship might not be operated by anyone. When 20 formidable Space Marines arrived at a hall along the corridor, it contained some cargo boxes and nothing else. Over there, the lieutenant pointed to a passage on the other side of the hall, signaling his brothers to continue forward. As they reached the middle of the hall, the airlocks they came through and the one ahead suddenly closed. Prepare for demolition. The lieutenant's order was simple and direct, his heart completely calm. Space Marines would not be trapped by a few doors. He also understood that their activities were being watched by the ship's operators. The opponent seemed to be toying with them like a cat with a mouse, attempting to mock the Emperor's warriors, the Imperium's Astartes. However, the arrogant enemy didn't know that they weren't toying with a mouse, but with enraged Space Marines. Harlan on the bridge was indeed observing them, his gaze fixed on the tall, swiftly moving intruders. The intruders wore crude and savage power armor, with bulky and oversized power packs. However, the people inside the power armor were highly efficient, with close and coordinated teamwork. Cover the Sentinels, entry and test their combat capabilities. The lights in the hall suddenly began to brighten, immediately alerting the Space Marines, who raised their bolt guns. The gaze of all 20 of them was mostly concentrated on the two doors, as these were the only passages. At the same time, they didn't forget to have a few eyes scanning the empty spaces, vigilant for possible unexpected situations. Stay alert, the enemy is coming. The lieutenant growled in the comms channel, raising his plasma pistol with his left hand and activating the power sword in his right. The brightness kept increasing, and the scene inside the hull gradually blurred in their vision. Even the Space Marines' helmet visors couldn't filter out the blinding white light. They instinctively huddled together, their helmet visors constantly switching perspectives, searching for enemies in the light. Their implanted visual control organs began to overload in the super bright light. The Space Marines felt they were in a white world, able to see only 3 meters in front of them. Then there, Lyman's ear, heard faint rustling in the quiet hall, 20 of them in total. Bang! 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 The savage, crude sound of bolt guns rang out. Without the lieutenant's command, the Astartes fired towards where the sounds originated. They listened intently, gathering the faint sounds in the white world, catching the explosions of bolter rounds hitting their targets. However, they found nothing. As the dazzling white light gradually returned to normal, 20 warriors, clad in power armor and holding various glowing weapons, appeared out of nowhere in the hall, standing at a distance and looking at them. They were also tall, their white power armor covered in battle scars, their gazes sharp as swords. The white armored warriors said nothing, raising their blue glowing weapons and pointing at their opponents. Capture them. The sentinels had teleported into the hall. Harlan was very curious about these outsiders and wanted to capture them for interrogation. Soldier against soldier, general against general, tough guy against tough guy, hero against hero. The two sides, with great understanding, faced off 20 against 20, each picking an opponent to begin the battle. Bolt guns roared, the large caliber savage weapons auto-feeding ammunition, striking the sentinels, dimensional shields, creating a blue glow that disappeared like a mud ox entering the sea. The Space Marines' expressions changed, they quickly dropped their guns and drew their tactical knives, charging into close combat. Plasma bolts were swallowed by the shields, and the lieutenant, wielding his power sword, charged towards the sentinels. The spacious hall now seemed cramped, as 40 superhuman warriors charged at each other face to face. For the Emperor. The Space Marines' wild war cry echoed through the breathing grills in the hall. We are the blades of Argent Newer. The sentinels retaliated, brandishing their weapons and lunging forward. When the two sides clashed, the Space Marines swung their knives, aiming for the joints of the white armored warriors' armor, but their attacks were blocked by the weapons in their opponents' hands. The two sides exchanged a brief blow, then immediately separated. This situation happened simultaneously across the battlefield, surprising both sides. How could he keep up with my speed? Some Space Marines even had their weapons severed by dimensional light blades in the first round of engagement. Interesting. After a brief surprise, the sentinels continued to wield their weapons, attacking the invaders. Having witnessed the power of the weapons, the Space Marines retreated repeatedly, avoiding their sharp edges. The situation in the hall was one-sided. The Space Marines' proud physical prowess was not superior, and their power armor and weapons were far inferior. They encountered opponents they had never met before, slowly pushing the Emperor's warriors to the brink. The lieutenant was now in dire straits. His power sword had been cut in half by the opponent's lightsaber in the first round, and he was fighting with the broken sword, which was still imbued with a disintegrating force field. The white armored warrior's weapon was not only sharp, but his martial arts were also superb. He wielded his lightsaber, and the lieutenant couldn't even touch him. His sword grew shorter and shorter, and the lieutenant was forced to turn and evade a crucial blow, exposing his entire back. Then he felt his power armor grow heavy, his body's exertion losing synchronization with the armor, and he fell to his knees on the ground. The lieutenant understood that with the power pack destroyed, the power armor was a living coffin. Such situations were commonplace in the hall. The sentinels, restraint, technique, with its eerie sudden stops and bursts of power, left the Space Marines unable to grasp their moves. A seemingly unstoppable gunblade, clearly aimed at the head, would suddenly lose force the moment the Space Marine braced to block it. With a sudden reverse thrust, the gun's hilt would be brought between the legs, abruptly flipping the Space Marine into the air. While he was briefly airborne and defenseless, the sentinels would turn, move behind him, and sever his power pack. The Space Marines were all disarmed of their power packs, some lying on their backs, some prone on the ground, and some still standing. boasting about weapon superiority. The lieutenant gritted his teeth, pushing against the weight of his power armor to stand up from the ground. You are quite interesting, the sentinel said, putting away his weapon and looking at the unyielding lieutenant. Even in martial arts alone, you couldn't beat me. Let's go. The sentinels put away his weapon, certain that the invaders posed no further threat, and their armor was difficult to remove. What are you going to do? The lieutenant stood with difficulty, panting, his voice hoarse. We will never surrender. You don't have a choice now. The sentinels who was speaking to him kicked him to the ground, looking down at the heavily armored warrior. I can drag you, or you can walk up with dignity. The sentinels extended his palm, his meaning clear. I'll walk myself. The lieutenant slapped his arm away and struggled to get up from the ground. Take them. The sentinels escorted the captured Space Marines to the bridge from behind. The sentinels escorted the Space Marines, taking the elevator to the bridge, where a gigantic robot came into view. The lieutenant's helmet was removed, revealing a tough man. He looked at the tall robot, his face changing drastically, full of scorn and contempt. Abominable intelligence. Ha! He spat in disgust onto the battleship's floor. The robot ignored his insults, merely looking at the spittle on the ground, its eyes emitting blue scanning light. Saliva contains corrosive liquid, how interesting. Turing's electronic voice was full of interest, his left hand rose and shot out flames, evaporating the corrosive spittle. Abominable intelligence, what do you want? The lieutenant's gaze swept across the bridge. There were very few personnel here, and the gunfire outside the viewport had stopped, yet their battleship had not sunk. Did you hear that? He called you, abominable intelligence. Harlan grinned, stepping out from behind Turing, teasing his Iron Man brother. It doesn't matter. Turing shrugged in a human-like manner, then spread his hands. He despises me, and I despise him just as much. The Iron Man scrutinized the human before him, who had numerous signs of modification on his body, filled with deformed organs, a messy modified human. The lieutenant was about to retort, to curse the Iron Man's betrayal, and at the same time declare himself a warrior shaped by the Emperor. But his gaze was drawn to the scar-faced man in white armor. On his power armor's shoulder pad, there was a very familiar runic symbol. That red runic symbol was very famous on Terra. It was the mark of the 21st Legion. It was a mysterious rune inscribed on the gene seed of his cousins, a symbol of unknown meaning. The Emperor was the first to interpret the mark. He personally named the 21st Legion, Doom Slayer. Those cousins were extraordinarily powerful, completely different from other legions, as if they were another kind of creature. He was very familiar with that rune. In his superhuman reflective mind, he immediately knew what he was facing. It was very likely a son of the Emperor, a Primarch lost in the galaxy. The lieutenant's mind immediately became active. He could imagine the honor he might grasp. The Imperium currently had only one Primarch, the gene father of the 16th Legion, Horus Lupercal. The Primarch was found on the gang world of Chthoniya. The Adeptus Mechanicus discovered and brought him back, allowing Horus to return to the Emperor's side. Since then, the Great Crusade had become even more fervent, but no other Primarchs had been recovered. And now, the lieutenant had a clue to a Primarch before him. His heart was filled with excitement, the honor of recovering a Primarch beckoning right before his eyes. He did not believe in coincidence. In the star sea tens of thousands of light-years away, it was impossible for identical marks to appear. It must be a Primarch. What are you looking at? Harlan clearly felt that the captive opposite him was a bit smug, ever since he had looked at him. Recalling the captive's gaze, Harlan tilted his head and looked at the mark on his own shoulder. His expression changed, and he asked in a low voice, "You recognize this mark?" 1. Harlan was always particularly attentive to matters concerning Blaskowitz. The light in that man's eyes did not seem false. He recognized this mark. Cough, cough. The lieutenant cleared his throat, trying to make his voice clear, and looking at the mark, he said, "We are from Terra, we are the Emperor's warriors. As for that mark," he looked around, still feeling somewhat uneasy, "I must meet its owner before I can reveal it to you." The lieutenant thought this was the safest approach. After all, the existence of the mark indeed proved that the Primarch was connected to them. But what exactly the connection was, he was a bit unsure, so he would keep the white-armored man in suspense until he met the Primarch. Terra. Harlan frowned at these two words, looking at the man before him. As early as the day Blaskowitz was crowned, the navigators had said that Terra had risen again, and their arrival was foreseeable. He just hadn't expected the people of Terra to arrive so quickly, extending their reach to the northern galaxy in just 30 years. The sentinels on the bridge, hearing that people were from Terra, also perked up. The Emperor. Turing the Iron Man stroked his iron head, stating its opinion, sounds like a dictator. Shut up. Intelligent machine. Perhaps seeing the mark, the lieutenant's tone became much more polite, but equally full of anger. Your soulless mouth is not worthy of calling him. His resentful expression was as if Turing had done something incredibly rebellious. Hey, I just said, the Emperor. Turing's electronic eye swiveled, looking at the indignant modified human, the Emperor. The Emperor. The Emperor. The Emperor. The Emperor. You. The lieutenant's face turned purple, and he panted heavily. If not for his reservations, he would surely rush up and fight the machine to the death. Enough. Harlan spoke, stopping the farce, and asked the outsiders, what is your purpose here? The lieutenant lowered his head, a look of defiant resolve on his face. He knew in his heart that his ship had been blown here by a warp storm, with no other purpose. But now there was one, to welcome back a Primarch. Do you think we can't make you talk if you don't? Harlan looked at him, puffing out his chest to exert pressure, and said in a threatening tone, we do not fear Terra. You can try. The lieutenant was fearless, meeting Harlan's threatening gaze directly. I will say nothing until I meet the owner of the mark. As for them, he looked at his battle brothers behind him, scanned them, and then proudly said, they, like me, are fearless. The Emperor's warriors never fear death, we are born to die for it. The Space Marines echoed him, they never feared death, for death was their only way to serve the Emperor. Quite spirited. Harlan snorted, but deep down he somewhat admired these warriors. What is your name? Lieutenant Garion of the Imperium of Man's 5th Legion. Harlan nodded silently, also knowing where he came from. Imperium of Man, it sounded like a righteous name, and should pose no threat to Blaskowitz. Lock them in the cell, and let's return to Argent Noor. Harlan ordered the ship to return. He was also very curious about Blaskowitz's origins, and whether there was any connection to the Imperium of Man. Brother Turing. Harlan gently called the Iron Man, and said to it seriously, contact the other fleets, tell them to come and guard this ship, and don't let them escape. As Blaskowitz's protector, Harlan thought long-term, if they dared to make any move after meeting Blaskowitz, he would silence them. Soon, a battleship came to rendezvous, and after explaining a few things, Harlan embarked on his journey back to Argent Noor. Brother Garion, is that true? After being locked in the cell, a space marine couldn't hold back and quietly asked Garion. They had also seen the mark on the white armored warrior's body, it was indeed the emblem of the 21st Legion. With the Space Marine's eyesight and memory, there would be no mistake in seeing or remembering it. Brother, what are you talking about? There were Legion brothers in the team who were born in the void and had never seen the Doomslayer's mark, so they were naturally curious and immediately asked Garion. Garion pondered for a moment, knowing they were constantly being monitored. Dragging his powerless power armor, he walked to his brother's side, squeezed close, and wrote a few words in his hand, Primarch. The battle brother's body trembled, and he nodded silently, squatting in the corner of the cell. When they were first captured, the Space Marines had been planning an escape, to send word back to the Imperium and let the War Council prepare early. Now, even if those white armored warriors tried to send them away, they would shamelessly stay. The Men of Stone were a class of artificially created beings created during the Dark Age of technology in roughly M21. 1. According to ancient accounts, the Men of Stone were engineered by the Men of Gold for the purpose of deep space colonization. 1-2 Though physically inferior to their creators, they were capable of building great artifice, and constructed the Men of Iron as their eyes and ears. 2 As the Stone Men existed in a state of half-life, they were unaffected by the demons of the warp, something that made warp travel much easier for them. In time, mankind learned to place itself into the ships of the Stone Men, protected from the depredations of the warp. 2. Ains Ulgi 0 When creators' thoughts. 1 Comments 0 Vote. Reunion. On the Noor Ring, Blaskowitz sat in his palace, attending to matters that required his decision. Conquering the Noor stars was no easy feat. Over 30 years, Blaskowitz faced countless challenges. Even harder than conquest was governance, leading Argent Noor back to glory and pushing further into deep space. The people of the Noor stars held great expectations for their homeland and firm belief in their ruler, Blaskowitz. During Blaskowitz's 30 years of rule, the Noor stars gradually submitted, and civilization experienced a flourishing development. The population control laws, once enacted due to planetary resource issues, were abolished, and Argent Noor's population rapidly increased. As for genetic degradation, the Golden Men's genetic degradation was too severe, even the Iron Men Musala and his team were helpless. Ultimately, it was Blazkowicz who sought out Life Forger Primal, obtaining a genetic formula from it, which, combined with the Iron Men's technology, stabilized the declining genes. Among the newer stars, much technology was recovered, and a large number of STC templates were reactivated. Although civilization had indeed regressed, the people of the newer stars maintained a relatively prosperous life. With the help of intelligent machinery, everyone had enough food and clothing, and everyone could acquire knowledge. However, Blazkowicz's rule over the newer stars still enforced strict ideological education to prevent another invasion by chaos. The Sentinels Academy moved to the newer ring, expanding its scale by hundreds of times, accepting students from other worlds. For academies on other worlds, whose lifespans and bodies couldn't compare to the Sentinels, Blazkowicz also tailored training programs. These mortal warriors would serve as an auxiliary army, assisting the Sentinels in large-scale operations. For the sake of coordinated operations, Blazkowicz specifically authored the Code of War, encouraging mutual learning between the two sides. Various Forge worlds in the Void were reactivated by Sophia and the Iron Men, continuously producing warships. Blazkowicz awakened a portion of the Iron Man, granting them freedom of choice. Those willing to continue fighting for Argent Noor were assigned to the fleet, serving as fleet mobilizers or strategists. Those unwilling to fight could also live among the newer stars, leading a slow, pastoral life. Blazkowicz granted them citizenship, not as servants, everything depended on the Iron Man's wishes. However, there was one condition: the Iron Man could never betray Argent Noor and had to swear an oath to Blazkowicz. Upon the promulgation of this decree, the Iron Man swore allegiance en masse. Even some Iron Man who had planned for a pastoral life were willing to return to the army. They were willing to take up arms and protect Argent Noor once more. After 30 years of conquest and management, the war potential of the newer stars was gradually being unleashed, with population becoming the biggest weakness. The military equipment produced by the Forge worlds remained unused, and warships were sealed in the void, awaiting to be manned. Sophia once suggested using forbidden technologies, such as artificial wombs, to quickly create a large workforce. After much deliberation and a series of experiments, Blazkowicz rejected this proposal. He profoundly understood that Argent Noor's enemy was chaos, the evil of the warp. Blazkowicz immediately saw that those cultivated in artificial wombs had incomplete souls and inherently low resistance to chaos. In everything, Blazkowicz was always urgently preparing for the return of chaos. In his future plans, he intended to forge the newer stars into an iron bulwark, with their will sharpened into a keen blade. My lord, Harlan has returned. Sophia appeared beside the desk, having slightly enlarged her image. Otherwise, at her original projection size, she wouldn't even be able to reach the desktop. Has the Resistance Alliance been completely eliminated? Blazkowicz didn't even lift his head, continuing to sign decrees with the quill in his hand. No, Sophia replied truthfully, bringing up the battle report. According to Turing's log, they encountered an accident during the pursuit and let one ship escape. Have new ships gone after it? Yes, my lord, other warships have taken over the pursuit. Then what was the accident? Blazkowicz continued to ask. He believed that with Harlan's capabilities, ordinary accidents wouldn't faze him. They are docking their ships, you will see them soon. Blazkowicz nodded slightly, quickening his movements to finish the last bit of paperwork. He sighed inwardly. Compared to dealing with these documents, he would rather be a warrior on the front lines, fighting to his heart's content. If not for Sophia's help with the documents, the papers on his desk would surely pile up into mountains. When Blazkowicz finished his work and leaned back in his chair to rest, there was a commotion outside the throne hall. The sound of armor clashing against the ground was mixed with more unfamiliar armor sounds. Harlan, as per regulations, placed restraints on Garion and the others to prevent them from suddenly attacking. Though he thought it made no difference, it was highly unlikely these people could defeat Blazkowicz. Garion and the others were amazed by what they saw and heard, feeling like a bunch of bumpkins. The prosperity and cultural atmosphere here surpassed even the throne world. Upon entering the throne hall, they saw the giant seated on the throne. At their first glance, the Space Marine knew that only a Primarch could possess such a magnificent stature. The Space Marine puffed out his chest, suppressing his inner excitement, and marched forward, following the Sentinels. Harlan was somewhat surprised by the change in demeanor of these Imperium of Man soldiers. They looked like soldiers undergoing inspection. Blaskowitz was also a little surprised. The people Harlan brought back seemed to hold him in great reverence. Great Primarch. Son of the Emperor. The 5th Legion Space Marine extends its highest reverence to you. Upon nearing Blaskowitz, before Harlan could even order the captives to kneel, they had already dropped to one knee, loudly praising Blaskowitz's majesty. Question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark question mark. Harlan looked at Blaskowitz, then at the kneeling captives, his gaze oscillating between the two. What is a Primarch? What is the son of the Emperor? What is a Space Marine? And what is the 5th Legion? Blaskowitz's gaze rested on the kneeling Space Marine. Their reverence did not seem feigned, but rather sincere and heartfelt. Rise. His voice was calm, yet carried an inexplicable authority. Garion and the others dared not delay, rising from the ground and standing ramrod straight, accepting the scrutiny of a Primarch. Perhaps it was the innate genetic suppression, but just a casual glance made the brave and skilled Space Marine sweat profusely. It was then that they realized the Primarch before them was as valiant as a god, even Horus could not compare to him. Tell me what you know. The calm tone held an irresistible dominance. The Space Marine, who feared no death, felt a tremor at this moment. Unlike his attitude towards Harlan, Garion again knelt with his brothers. I will tell you everything I know. Soon, Garion told Blaskowitz everything he knew. The Emperor's rise on Terra, the Astronomicon lighting the galaxy, and the Great Crusade to restore humanity's glory. Harlan listened with a surging heart. From the Space Marine's powerful narration, he seemed to see a grand vision. Blaskowitz also learned for the first time that the one who created him was the Emperor, and that he had 20 brothers. 21 Space Marine legions, modeled after the Primarch, with the mission to conquer the galaxy. The throne hall was silent for a long time, then Blaskowitz let out a long breath. Let's go see Terra. Garion and the others were visibly excited. What greater honor could there be than bringing back a Primarch? Release them. Signaling Harlan to remove the restraints, Blaskowitz slowly rose. The Void Wanderer is preparing for a long voyage, target Terra. As you command. Sophia appeared and then vanished, going to prepare for the voyage. Garion and the others were no longer surprised. Under the rule of a Primarch, the appearance of friendly intelligences was quite normal. When the Void Wanderer was ready, Blaskowitz, accompanied by the Space Marine, Harlan, and the Stone Man Musala, boarded the ship, preparing to depart for Terra. The navigator Francisca was already waiting on the ship. She had grown into a beautiful woman, much more independent in character, no longer timid. Depart. Blaskowitz sat on the throne, signaling that they could set off. The 5th Legion was awestruck by the grandeur of the Primarch's flagship, standing rigidly to the side, not daring to make any sudden movements. The Void Wanderer's warp engine activated, tearing open a warp rift in the real universe at the ship's prow. As the hull entered it, the warship left the real universe and entered the illusory warp. Navigation lock successful. Francisca leaned back in her chair, slowly closing her eyes, observing the warp currents with her forehead's single eye. My lord, with you here, our path ahead is clear. Target Terra, Void Wanderer, depart. Blaskowitz, aboard his flagship, embarked on the long warp journey to Terra. Far away in the Imperial Palace on Terra, the Emperor, clad in full armor, was also preparing to board a warship and venture into the void. Alpha Legion operatives had discovered a suspected Primarch on the ice world of Fenris, awaiting the Emperor's confirmation. He stepped out of his chambers, but his eager strides halted. Sensing his master's pause, Valder, who was ahead, turned to look at the Emperor. There was no doubt or confusion in his eyes. He simply stood still, waiting. Every action of the Master of Mankind was the result of careful deliberation, and the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes did not need to question, only to await his master's command. Notify Horus to return. Prepare to welcome a brother's return. The Emperor had stopped, and Valder relayed his command to the accompanying astropath, sending a message to his son, Horus, who was far out in the void on his great crusade, to recall him. The astropath, cloaked and hooded, bowed respectfully, his gray-white eyes filled with reverence, and departed to convey the Emperor's directive. Number 21 is returning, the Emperor said to Valder. There was an excitement and urgency in the Master of Mankind's voice that had not been heard in ages. Valder's eyes narrowed, understanding the reason the Emperor had halted his journey to Fenris and remained on Terra. It was because the Primarch most valued by the Emperor had found his way home from the void. I need to prepare a celebration, a grand celebration like never before. The Emperor returned to his chambers, and his servants helped him remove his golden power armor. His tone was uncharacteristically excited, to celebrate the return of number 21. Warp travel was monotonous. At least, Garion had thought so before. Before entering the warp, Imperial ships needed to activate their Geller field, creating a bubble of real space to prevent intrusion by the bizarre energies of the warp. Ships had to lower their armor plates, obscuring all viewports, including the bridge, to prevent sight and thought from influencing the reality bubble. The spaceship, like a sealed metal coffin, bounced through the warp currents, a lone boat in a storm. Now it was different. Perhaps it was due to the Primarch's presence, but this magnificent warship seemed not to have activated its Geller field. The bridge was also not sealed. Through the viewports, one could see the constantly churning, changing, and ultimately chaotic and beautiful energy streams of the warp. However, directly in front of the ship, there was a vast expanse of calm. The ship traversed the warp completely unaffected, as if the warp energies had constructed a smooth, clear path before it. He found it incredible, ultimately attributing everything to the might of the Primarch. My lord, Garion asked cautiously, his voice humble, the ship seems to be decelerating. Although there were no reference points in the warp, the keen senses of the Astartes told him the ship was indeed slowing down. He had stood by the Primarch's seat the entire way, answering the Primarch's questions. Feeling the ship decelerate, he carefully inquired. Garion was anxious. He desperately hoped the Primarch would return to the Imperium, and his brothers would be bathed in endless glory. There was also a crucial point. The cousins of the Luna Wolves had been exceedingly proud during the 30 years since Primarch Horus' return. The warriors of the 5th Legion now eagerly wished to bring their Primarch back to shatter the smugness of those who had enjoyed being the only ones with a Primarch for 3 decades. It is decelerating, a mechanical, electronic voice, not the Primarch's, answered Garion. There is a barrier here, deceleration is required. A barrier. Garion murmured in confusion. He didn't understand how there could be a barrier in the warp. An unknown warp phenomenon. An unidentified barrier exists here, forcing the ship to slow down, Turing's electronic voice hissed, explaining the unknown warp phenomena to the outsider. The intelligent machine would not tell the outsider that the barrier was an ancient construct, an inhibitor, creating a speed bump in the warp. At the outermost edge of the newer stars, within the ancient fortress star system, a powerful ancient machine projected folds into the warp. This forced any ships approaching the newer stars through the warp to decelerate and exit the warp, awaiting inspection by the fortress system. Ships departing the newer stars also had to decelerate to pass through this area normally. Garion nodded continuously, looking as if he had just realized something. Their ship had been caught in a warp current, pulled off its normal course, and then, very much like hitting something, it suddenly lost control and decelerated, being thrown out of the warp. Now he understood. They had hit a barrier. It was like a vehicle speeding along, blown off course by a strong wind, then hitting a speed bump, losing control, and veering off the road. Blaskowitz glanced at Turing. The seemingly simple machine had many clever ideas in its intelligent circuits. The existence of the warp barrier was a crucial means for the newer stars to defend against external threats. All incoming ships were forced back into real space, confronting the fortress system on the necessary path. At our current speed, with a stable warp lane ahead, we can reach Terra in 3 months at most. Navigator Francisca was asleep within a machine, her body slumbering while her consciousness was connected to the ship's main control. With Sophia's help, the navigator and the digital life form worked together, constantly correcting the warp lane. One must know that on a journey spanning tens of thousands of light years, even a slight deviation in the course could result in a destination hundreds of light years off. Warp travel was beautiful at first, the scenery seemed lovely but concealed hidden dangers. With Blaskowitz's presence, the warp's defilements dared not approach. They only dared to hide in the shadows, watching the dead black hole, etched with runes, emitting intense malice, clawing and gnashing its teeth in the warp. Godslayer. Challenger. Defier. Doom Slayer. The hidden dangers of the warp dared not speak Blaskowitz's name directly. They whispered in the shadows, praying for him to leave quickly. The journey was smooth and uneventful. Blaskowitz continuously questioned Garion about the various current situations of the Imperium of Man. Garion naturally dared not conceal anything, pouring out all the knowledge in his memory about the Imperium's recent state. 3 months passed like yesterday, and the ship was now within reach of the Golden Sun. Attention, all. The Void Wanderer is about to reach its destination. Sophia's alert sounded, and the warp engine engaged, tearing open a rift to real space in the warp ahead of the ship. Geryon was now in a panic. The Primarch's flagship had not passed through the Gate of Tartarus, the stable warp gate of the solar system. Instead, it was entering humanity's throneworld directly from another direction. He seemed to want to give the Emperor a surprise. When a warship the size of a small planet burst forth from the warp fluctuations it generated spread throughout the solar system. Almost all auguries shrieked piercingly at the same time, and alert commands spread to every fortress. In the solar system, the throneworld, someone had plunged a knife into the heart of humanity. Proceed to Terra. Blaskowitz sat on his throne, giving the order expressionlessly, his inner thoughts and face showing no change whatsoever. There was no excitement or homesickness for him. To him, Terra was merely a birthplace, not a true home. At this moment, the solar system's communication channels were abuzz, confirming the origin of the enemy. Space telescopes finally captured the ship's silhouette, a magnificent warship, painted jet black, almost blending into the cosmic background. Most striking were the raised fins on its back, bearing a runic insignia on either side. The solar system observers knew it was the emblem of the Destroyer Legion, their unique mark. The Sentinels fell silent, unsure how to respond to this familiar yet strange warship. Let it pass. As they hesitated, a direct order from the throneworld dispelled their doubts. Hearing the chaotic communication channels instantly fall silent, Blaskowitz knew that the ship's markings had caused the solar system's defenders to drop their guard. Sophia, to please her master, had painted the ship jet black and emblazoned the insignia on both sides of the fins. The ship reflected black light in space, slowly gliding, gradually approaching Terra. It's not as beautiful as Argent Noor. In the panoramic command center, Harlan looked down at Terra below and shook his head, saying, disappointed. In the minds of the Starborn, Terra should have been a vibrant blue planet with vast oceans and a clean atmosphere. Now, it was desolate and barren, its surface covered only by cities of steel and hive cities that pierced the clouds. Geryon wanted to retort, but his mind involuntarily compared Argent Noor and Terra, realizing there was indeed no comparison between the two. He looked up and saw the Primarch raise his right hand, clenching it in the void, as if summoning something. A warp rift appeared on the bridge, and a red lightsaber, emanating malice, flew out of the crack, settling steadily into Blaskowitz's hand. Blaskowitz looked down at Terra, his expression serious. He didn't know what the outcome would be. Terra. I have returned. 3 comments 0 vote. Father. Horace Lupercal. For 2 long months, he had been the master of Terra. The Primarch of the 16th Legion had shouldered the full weight of his father's imperium, a burden he carried with the easy strength of a god. The master of mankind, the revered and terrible emperor, was consumed by a task no less grand than the Great Crusade itself, the orchestration of a magnificent ceremony. It was said that a brother, long lost to the fathomless void, was returning. A Primarch, forged in fire and war, was finally coming home. What is he doing, father? Ezekiel Abaddon, first captain of the Luna Wolves and lord of the Gastellan Terminators, stood at the cross-shaped window of the Gothic spire. His hair was bound in a defiant topknot, and he watched the streets below, choked with celebratory decorations. Abaddon, the most trusted son, the blade of his father's will, was filled with a rare and cutting doubt. He, in his words, of course, referred to the Emperor, the master of their destiny. Abaddon withdrew his gaze from the garish spectacle and looked at his Gene father, who was signing decrees at a massive, hewn-stone desk. He summoned us from the front lines for a mere spectacle. The first captain's voice was a low growl of incredulity. The Emperor had recalled the Warmaster from the bleeding edge of the galaxy just for this. Abaddon had plumbed the depths of the Emperor's commands for a deeper meaning, only to find nothing but the raw, unvarnished intent of a celebration. Horace Lupercal, who inherited the Emperor's inhuman charisma, smiled, a reassuring, predatory curve of his lips. He calmly signed the final document and looked up at his son. A hint of dissatisfaction resonated in Abaddon's words, a nascent defiance that Horace understood and tacitly allowed. The Emperor's astropathic call had ripped Horace from conquest to attend this grand ceremony on Terra. A celebration to welcome a brother, that reason is sufficient. Horace looked at Abaddon, his gaze a calm abyss, his voice a steady, confident command. Its resonance carried a weight of truth no lesser being could challenge. A father holding a celebration for a lost son. I find that reason to be very adequate. My brothers are not like me, they grew up alone in the Star Rivers, without receiving our father's teachings. He owes them a debt. Horus understood his father, he was the master of mankind, the infinitely glorious emperor, and also a father. The return of a lost brother was indeed worth such a spectacle, it was what a father should do. Just as he had done for Horus, keeping him close, imparting knowledge, and forging his character. For 30 years, father and son had bled and conquered side by side to dispel the darkness of the long night. Their bond had transcended the simple link of father and son, they were a symbiosis of teacher and student, father and brother. His father called him his Sagittarius, and gave him a golden ring as a token of their father-son affection. Such things will happen more and more in the future, Abaddon, you must learn to accept it. I have 20 brothers, and he has 21 sons. Horus spoke with a deceptive calm, his hand continuing to write, but his heart was a storm. He had never seen such a raw expression on his father's face, an excited anticipation, a vision of the future. Even for Horus himself, his father had held expectations, but never such naked longing. Longing. Horus distilled his father's entire emotion into a single word. The emperor knew who was returning and craved to see him, willing to abandon his plans for Fenris to wait. But after a series of thoughts, Horus gradually released the tension in his soul. Just as he had told Abaddon, he was the son who grew up at his father's knee, enjoying 30 years of paternal love exclusively. It was a precious emotion that no celebration or ceremony could compare to. A father's genuine love for his son, along with careful education and devotion. Everything he was doing now was to make up for his debt to his other brothers. That debt deserved to be compensated with grand celebrations and fervent rituals. Who do you think will return? Abaddon faced Horus, pointing to the precious ceremonial items on the wide boulevard. He truly values him highly. Is it the eldest son? Abaddon was always a honed blade, incisive and bold. He felt that only the eldest son could be worthy of such an honor, the template for all legions, the embodiment of power and authority, the ancient and proud first. No. Horus shook his head. His hands worked ceaselessly, but his mind processed multiple thoughts with effortless grace. It should be the last son. He gave his answer, an answer unexpected by Abaddon. Everything had a precedent, the 21st Legion's power and uniqueness were completely different from the others. Though they were few in number, the Emperor still gave them the best of everything, cherishing them exceptionally. The Jenison of a brother, who could receive the Emperor's special attention in such a high-spec ceremony, indeed matched the return of a brother. So it's him. Abaddon pondered, not questioning the Primarch's judgment. The wisdom and power of a Primarch compared to a space marine was a gulf a mortal could not cross. Abaddon recalled that mysterious legion, they rarely interacted with outsiders, silent and incredibly powerful. When the Emperor went to Mars to sign the Olympia Treaty, those mysterious black-armored warriors stood beside him and the Custodes. Abaddon had even privately suspected that the 21st Legion was the Emperor's ultimate creation, the final form of the Space Marine. But seeing their sparse numbers and the pitifully low success rate of gene adaptation, he dismissed that idea. It was said that the 21st Legion had just broken the 100-man mark, and the birth of every warrior was accompanied by great sacrifice. 10 years ago, their legion suffered its heaviest loss when a Doom Slayer named Onus unfortunately died. The legion held the grandest funeral for Onus, whose body was never recovered, mourning their fallen brother. No need to think too much. When everything is before your eyes, the answer will naturally be there. Horus, dressed in simple clothes, walked to the window and looked at the crowd preparing for the parade. Then he looked at the figure standing high up, wearing a golden crown, with long black hair, draped in a white robe, watching the crowd, seemingly silent, but actually continuously directing the Custodes to issue orders and decorate the final streets. Perhaps sensing Horus' gaze, the Emperor looked up and returned a smile. Horus saw that smile, a burning light of anticipation, and nodded in acknowledgement. A hint of bitterness, a subtle blight, appeared in his heart. After this day, he would no longer have his father's love all to himself. He had to show the magnanimity of the first returned son, the true eldest son, and share his father's love with the returning brother. Compromise with his brother, compromise with the Imperium, compromise with the Great Crusade, compromise everything to unite his brothers, complete his father's great crusade, and make humanity great again. Thinking this, Horus let out a long breath. He had once yearned for the scene of his brother's return. This anticipation had been gradually worn away during his time with his father, even beginning to be subconsciously resisted. If he could have completed the Great Crusade with his father, reclaiming humanity's homeworld, just the two of them, how beautiful that picture would have been. The current Horus was not the wolf god of the Luna Wolves, nor the glorious Primarch, but a mortal who had lost all of his father's love. His tall figure stood by the window, looking at the joyful crowds on the street, a complex emotion welling up within him. He wavered and compromised between responsibility and family affection. Father, Abaddon opened his mouth, feeling the complex emotions coming through their blood bond, and spoke, wanting to comfort his gene father. Ezekiel Abaddon. Horus gently shook his head, motioning for his Jennison not to speak. You don't understand. Abaddon indeed did not understand the emotions between a god and a demigod. The two looked out the window together, as if isolated from the surging clamor, everything outside unrelated to them. In the silent atmosphere, Horus' gaze never left the Emperor. He saw his father's body shake, and he looked up at the void. Primarch. An urgent voice came from the radio on the desk. An unauthorized vessel has jumped out of the warp, and the ship bears the insignia of the 21st Legion. Horus smiled slightly. At this moment, he felt a different kind of anticipation, anticipating the brother he had never met. He raised a hand, and Abaddon handed him the communicator. Let it come. Horus suddenly laughed. His returning brother seemed a bit impolite. Let's go, we'll prepare to welcome our brother's return. Horus left the cruciform window, strode out of the office, and called his Jennisons. At this moment of universal attention, the first son to return must display the proper bearing, allowing the returning brother to feel acceptance and love. The wild child returning from the void, feeling the warm welcome of his older brother and father, must surely be moved to tears. Horus thought this, and the paternal love stripped from his heart was gradually filled with brotherly affection. Perhaps even Horus himself didn't know that within his understanding of brotherhood and responsibility, there was a hint of showing off and jealousy. At the 21st Legion's garrison, Blaskowitz tidied the armor for each of his brothers, preparing to welcome the return of their gene father. According to the Emperor's prediction, today was the day of his arrival on Terra, a crucial moment for him to reunite with his Jennisons. The Destroyer Legion, returning from the void, had been preparing for this meeting for a long time. Their armor and weapons were brand new, polished with high-quality sacred oils from the Adeptus Mechanicus, and the Legion's symbols were drawn with the brightest cinnabar. 100 Gene brothers, in their most spirited posture, awaited the return of their Gene father. When Blaskowitz looked up and saw the magnificent warship, inscribed with the same mark, standing in Terra's orbit, he knew their Gene father had returned. Go! Blaskowitz roared, a rare occurrence, not daring to speak through the psychic link. Long ago, the warriors clearly felt a powerful presence added to their psychic link. They knew it was their Gene father, but before meeting him, the Doom Slayers dared not disturb him. Blaskowitz stared at the crucible sword with sharp eyes, its blade seemed even sharper than before. The crimson glow of the red lightsaber emitted a strong malicious aura, its several powerful concepts bearing their fangs and claws. No one on the bridge dared to look directly at it, even the sentinels who had participated in the War of Truth still could not meet the crucible sword's edge. Garion and the other space marines found it even harder to control themselves. The primal fear suppressed by the Emperor surged up, and the untouched gene seed in their chests even sent signals to flee. The Emperor's fearless warriors now only felt fear, a primal dread from the soul that courage could not overcome. Sophia's holographic image began to distort, even the digital life felt fear, as being grazed by that sword would mean complete eradication. Blaskowitz reigned in the crucible sword's edge, hanging it at his waist, having already prepared for the worst. Go, my soldiers, descend upon Terra. He strode forward, walking with a powerful gait, without any fear or homesickness. My lord, Sophia, however, called out to Blaskowitz, a hint of hesitation in her digital emotions. What is it, my advisor? Blaskowitz stood there and asked Sophia, do you have any concerns? Sophia and Turing, the two artificial intelligences on the bridge, knelt, saying in unison, the Imperium of Man is hostile to sentient machines, our existence will cause you trouble. Garion also nodded in agreement with the sentient machine's point of view. The Imperium's hostility towards artificial intelligence stemmed from the Emperor, no one could defy him. You must have faith in me. Blaskowitz raised his hand, signaling his subjects to rise, his heroic face serious and earnest. You are my subjects, my warriors, my advisors. We are equals, friends, and comrades. Our friendship and recognition do not require the Imperium of Man's approval. You pledge allegiance to me, and I pledge allegiance to you. If here. Blaskowitz lightly tapped his foot, his boot resting on Terra. If they do not recognize you, I will likewise not recognize them. The vast star sea should be able to accommodate us. After Blaskowitz finished speaking, he stood still and extended his hand to Sophia, genuinely inviting her. Our souls share the same spark. The artificial intelligence was so excited it was incoherent, its data processing briefly freezing, but it instinctively reached out its hand to Blazkowicz. Even as a virtual image, Sophia could still feel the warmth, a glowing, warm soul. Turing's mechanical limbs trembled incessantly. It didn't know how to express itself, its iron fists clenching and unclenching. Ever since they were awakened by the person before them, they were no longer servants, but were granted equal personhood. He never spoke empty words but always acted upon them. Even today, facing the Imperium of man, he still kept his promise, treating machines as equals. Garion was equally excited. What could be more inspiring than a great Primarch saying, "We are equals, our souls are the same." Not to mention machines, even a space marine, he even wanted to transfer to the 21st Legion. Let's go. Let's go down and see them, and let them see us. Blazkowicz lightly held Sophia's hand, leading the Sentinels and Space Marines to the landing craft. They could teleport, but it was not an option. He needed to display power, not reveal his hand. Space Marine, where should we land? Blazkowicz turned and asked the 5th Legion soldier. When on someone else's territory, respect was still due. Given your stature, you should land on the promenade in the palace courtyard, only there can your glory be accommodated. Then let's go there. The Emperor stood beside Horus, and they were indeed waiting at the stairs at the end of the courtyard promenade, awaiting the return of a lost son. The warship hovering in Terra's orbit, beautiful and powerful, cast a huge shadow that enveloped the entire continent. Everyone present was no mortal, so they naturally saw a gate open in the belly of the massive void ship, releasing a landing craft. The Emperor was very nervous now, even more nervous than facing the 4 gods. Dressed in his finest, he repeatedly checked his attire. Valder, do I look presentable? A voice echoed in Valder's mind. He looked at the Emperor again, his meticulous gaze sweeping over every crease of the robe, and he said with utmost certainty, "My lord, very presentable." "You have asked 12 times already. Malkador, adjust my laurel wreath, I feel it's a bit crooked." "For the 6th time, my old friend." Horus looked at the burning landing craft, his eyes equally complex. His thoughts were incredibly profound, and no one knew what he was thinking. When the white landing craft touched down on the palace promenade, a huge cheer erupted. The dense crowds on both sides of the promenade were all elegantly dressed nobles, with custodians standing in front of them, also wearing magnificent ceremonial golden armor. The central corridor was a hand-knitted red carpet, embroidered with golden double-headed eagles, flanked by glittering gemstones of various colors. The airlock opened, and the 5th Legion warriors emerged. They stood tall and proud, and after appearing, they moved to one side. The Emperor nodded slightly. The 5th Legion warriors had found their Primarch, and they deserved this honor. Then, the expressions of the Imperial High Command on the steps gradually stiffened, and the cheering subsided considerably. Members of the Adeptus Mechanicus attending the ceremony, seeing the creations appearing before them, had their mechanical appendages twitching, and sparks flew from their eyes. The ground trembled slightly with the synchronized footsteps. 2 groups of people emerged from the landing craft. They were machines and humans. The human contingent was on the left, clad in white power armor, with the lead warrior carrying a large banner, its black surface embroidered with a red mark. The Iron Man contingent was on the right, equally orderly, with bodies of steel and iron, their electronic eyes constantly scanning, and the lead one also carrying a large banner. They marched out of the landing craft with proud strides, heads held high, facing everyone's gaze. Their synchronized steps and neat formation clearly indicated they were a strong and formidable army. The Imperial officials on the steps looked at the sentient machines with an awkward expression, but they did not act out, for the main figure had not yet emerged. The contingent split down the middle, warriors and machines, both placing their large banners on the ground in a tacit understanding, creating a resounding clang. Then, a single figure emerged from the hatch. He was not exceptionally tall, draped in a black, gold-trimmed cape, and held a long spear. The Imperial side was somewhat uncertain if he was a Primarch. He stood tall and proud, stepping onto the red carpet, then turned to survey the crowds on both sides, and looked towards the end of the promenade. His voice was a coarse, weathered roar, "Kneel." Actually, Blazkowicz hadn't expected the Imperium of Man to prepare a welcome ceremony. Out of the commonality of rituals, he responded to the imperial ceremony in the manner of Argent Noor. Harlan gave a low shout, and the Iron Men and Sentinels all knelt on one knee, hands over their chests, to welcome the warrior king. Clang, clang, the people of the Imperium also knelt, similarly on one knee, mimicking the actions of the warriors and machines, with one hand pressed to their chests. Welcome the ruler of the Nur stars, King Noak, warrior king, doom slayer, Blaskowitz Novik. Harlan raised his spear with one hand, letting out a fervent roar, then knelt to welcome the warrior king. When the last person emerged from the landing craft, no one could hold back any longer, looking at his figure and letting out deafening cheers. He was so extraordinary, 5 meters tall and full of strength, his heroic face serious yet radiant. The Emperor's scion walked on the red carpet, chest out and head held high, full of pride. His eyes were calm, yet gleamed with wisdom. Wherever he passed, the gold-armored custodians knelt, showing him unprecedented respect. Representatives from the 20 Space Marine legions knelt before him, awed by the Primarch's power. Horus was moved by his brother. He had never seen such a valiant king, nor such a powerful warrior. He was surprised by the custodians, kneeling. Those golden-armored warriors were the embodiment of the Emperor's will, how could they perform such an act? Horus looked at his father, his eyes completely devoid of dissatisfaction, as if ignoring everything around him, only a radiant divine light shining. Satisfaction. The Emperor's eyes blazed with psychic power. He saw that extraordinary warrior, his incarnation who had wandered into the galaxy. Equally powerful and extraordinarily resilient. His gaze was like lightning, his dark eyes like stars, his brows deep as an abyss, and his bearing magnificent, sweeping all before him. He wore power armor, with the crucible sword at his waist. Only such a fierce man dared to challenge the 4 gods, only he dared to make an oath to slay gods. Blaskowitz Novik. It is indeed familiar. They call him that. The Emperor couldn't help but marvel at fate once more. Even across infinite void, the Doom Slayer's title remained eternal. The noble youths attending the ceremony on both sides were already sobbing uncontrollably. This was the most glorious moment of their lives, witnessing the return of an emperor's scion. This would be a rare moment in their lives, and even in the entire Imperium. Malkador watched the valiant figure and nodded continuously. The hope the Emperor spoke of indeed had his outstanding qualities. Valder also scrutinized the tall figure. Out of professional instinct, he compared himself to Blaskowitz and felt that he probably wouldn't last more than 2 rounds. The power contained within that body seemed capable of blowing up a planet. Blaskowitz clenched his fists, moved by the magnificent image of his gene father. He was taller and more powerful than Horus. Horus gazed at his brother, and a sudden pang of pain, inferiority, arose within his sense of glory, along with a surge of competitiveness. His brother commanded the stars, was the king of warriors, a great king without equal. And what was he? A gangster from Chthonia, an unknown nobody. For the first time, Horus seemed to feel a trace of inferiority and emotion regarding his identity. Blaskowitz Novik found his way home among the stars, while he was sent back by the Adeptus Mechanicus. While he was receiving instruction by his father's side, Blaskowitz had already struck fear into his enemies, winning everything with his own hands. Horus inwardly asked himself, in the same 30 years, could he have accomplished all that he had? He slowly shook his head, feeling deeply frustrated. He was so conflicted, envying his brother's achievements, proud of what his brother had done, yet also feeling inferior by comparison. The Emperor's psychic field trembled with his emotional fluctuations. He eagerly walked towards Blaskowitz, even though he was so close, he couldn't wait. He had to recognize him quickly and tell him about his grand plan. He descended the steps, actively walking towards Blaskowitz. Malkador and Valder followed behind him in surprise. The initial rehearsal wasn't like this. Blaskowitz was supposed to walk to the steps. They chose to follow, and everyone behind them chose to follow the Emperor. Blaskowitz also looked puzzled, but ultimately led 100 of his brothers, walking with determined steps towards his gene father. Even with the sun in the sky, the fireworks were still brilliant. Scented flowers were scattered from the sky, and the choir sang softly, sending blessings to the Emperor and his scion. In this solemn ceremony, no one was not deeply moved. Blaskowitz saw at the end of the path a middle-aged man in pure gold robes, shimmering with psychic energy, descending the steps and walking towards him with a smile. His skin was a moderately tanned brown, his long black hair bound back with a golden laurel wreath, his eyes were deep, darker than his other features, of average height but not thin. His average height, however, expanded with each step, gradually growing as tall as a Primarch. Almost instinctively, the glow of psychic energy made Blaskowitz frown. It was abnormal for a human to possess such powerful psychic abilities. He focused his gaze and looked closely, his sharp eyes scanning the approaching figure, but found no sign of chaos infection. The mark on the crucible sword at his waist was glowing. It detected the divinity on the man, and though deeply hidden, it could not escape the god-slaying sword's perception. Blazkowicz narrowed his eyes. He had discovered something very interesting, an incredibly powerful human, possessing both divinity and humanity. He took a step, leading Turing, Sophia, and the champion swordsman, striding towards the human emperor. He was certain. The middle-aged man hidden beneath the golden psychic light was his, gene father. This was undeniable. Even though Blazkowicz's only father in his heart was King Noak, he could not deny the relationship between himself and the man before him. The two met in the middle of the red carpet. The emperor, as tall as Blazkowicz, put his hands on his shoulders. I've waited for you for a long time. His voice was emotional, not conveyed through a custodian, but a genuine expression of longing. Blazkowicz opened his mouth, but couldn't bring himself to say, Father. It's all right, it's all right. The emperor patted Blazkowicz's shoulders, understanding his hesitation, and kindly said to him, You can call me whatever you like. Blazkowicz nodded at the emperor's goodwill and tolerance, with gratitude in his eyes. Thank you. They exchanged a smile, then embraced warmly. This is your brother. The emperor took Blazkowicz's hand and led him before Horus. He also awaits your return. Horus offered a friendly smile, opening his arms and saying to Blazkowicz, Horus Lupercal. Blazkowicz nodded in acknowledgement, also opening his arms. Blazkowicz Novik. Two giants, the emperor's great scions, opened their arms to each other and embraced tightly. Countless scribes and servitor skulls depicted this historic moment, recording the reunion of brothers, and the gathering of father and son. After embracing his brother, Blazkowicz's gaze fell on the tall warriors in black armor nearby. He shared a strange psychic connection with them, a connection that had existed ever since he left the warp. Blazkowicz felt his Genefather's gaze. He remained silent, then led the 100 men of the Destroyer Legion to kneel. Gene Father. Blazkowicz walked to him and reached out to pull up the Geneson before him. You are brave. On his way to Terra, after Garion, he learned of the 21st Legion's existence. They fought with the utmost ferocity, destroying one human enemy after another with boundless rage. For such warriors, even if they were not his own Genesons, he would still show them respect. Note. There's a theory out there that Blazkowicz is the grandfather of the Doom Slayer. We dare not dishonor your grace. What greater grace could there be than a word of affirmation from the being who bestowed their power? Blazkowicz felt that he might never cry again in this life, but hearing his Genefather's affirmation brought tears to his eyes. These most powerful warriors were, after all, still flesh and blood humans. This is my old friend, Malkador the Sigillite. The emperor brought an old man to Blazkowicz's side and introduced him. Blazkowicz nodded to his Genesons, then turned his gaze to the elder. He saw a sense of persistence and responsibility, the power contained within that aged body, and a great belief. Hello, elder. Blazkowicz nodded to him, sincerely admiring a mortal who had taken on extraordinary responsibilities. Malkador returned the smile. He had a very good impression of Blazkowicz. He was a qualified king. Constantine Valder. The emperor then pointed to the gold-armored warrior beside them. Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, my personal bodyguard. Blazkowicz's expression remained normal, and he also nodded in acknowledgement, saluting the gold-armored warrior. Inwardly, however, he shook his head. A psychic so immensely powerful needing a bodyguard, that seemed a bit. After some interaction, they became much more familiar. Harlan Ogilvy. Blazkowicz pulled Harlan forward, proudly introducing him, champion swordsman, his courage strikes fear into enemies. The emperor looked at the scarred warrior in white armor, realizing he was not as simple as he appeared, and nodded repeatedly, his power is beyond doubt. Sophia, the central lexicon. The lively atmosphere in the area paused, and the conversations quieted. The emperor's stance on AI was an unnegotiable resolution. Blazkowicz remained calm, looking directly into the emperor's eyes. She is my friend, my personal advisor. The emperor narrowed his eyes, looking expressionlessly at the ethereal digital life in the rows of Iron Men. Under the gaze of all, the Iron Men's armor gleamed with a malevolent light, and the digital lives of the central lexicon were as solid as flesh and blood. The emperor's gaze held no warmth. The machines that had once shattered the glory of humanity now stood before him, presented by his own son. He said nothing, his eyes not lingering on the intelligent machines, but he reached out and placed his arm on Blazkowicz's shoulder, a gesture both paternal and possessive. The celebration is over. The unified roar of the Custodes announced the end of the welcoming ceremony, a chilling, sudden cut to the fervent atmosphere. The golden armored warriors, extensions of the emperor's iron will, conveyed his thoughts with a single, brutal command. The crowd knelt, saluted, and departed in a silence more profound than any noise. The emperor did not respond directly to Blaskowitz's challenge. He turned and walked up the steps. Come in, we need to discuss this issue. His expression was serene, yet a barely perceptible tension twisted his brow. This was a grave matter. Artificial intelligence, strictly forbidden in the Imperium, had appeared at the most sacred place, and its implications had to be addressed with finality. The Imperial High Command and the dignitaries of Argent Nur still wore warm smiles, but they had lost their genuine edge. On the other hand, the red-robed sages of the Adeptus Mechanicus had a dangerous glint in their bionic eyes. At the palace entrance, the emperor stood at the highest point, looking back at the dispersing crowd. With a gentle wave of his hand, a golden psychic light, like a falling star, descended upon the masses. They would remember only the return of the Primarch, not the existence of the intelligent machines. Blaskowitz saw the act for what it was. Outwardly, he remained calm, but inwardly, he branded the emperor's actions as a lie. A ruler who deceived his people and altered their memories was anathema to the code of honor he had learned. Yet, Blaskowitz did not rage or accuse. He knew that even his own empire, for all its enlightenment, concealed secrets beneath its glorious exterior. Rulers were never different, they simply made their people believe that everything they saw was pure light. They were seeking a balance point between brutal reality and their grand ideals. He has more burdens than any mortal combined. An ancient voice, steeped in wisdom, resonated in his ear. Blaskowitz looked towards the source and saw Malkador smiling from the far right of the procession. The Sigillides' eyes held a deep plea, asking Blaskowitz to understand everything the emperor had done. Blaskowitz nodded in acknowledgement, his expression unchanged as he strode forward. His demeanor made Malkador's eyes light up. The returning Primarch, the warrior king, was not a savage barbarian driven by rage, but a profound and wise being. He was willing to listen, his character far surpassing the superficial arrogance of lesser men. We need to have a good proper talk. The emperor caught up from behind. He spoke solemnly, leading the group to a side hall. He and Blaskowitz entered, while everyone else and the machines waited at the entrance. Inside, two titans would negotiate. Outside, two factions stood divided, their positions as rigid as their metal. Led by Horus, the representatives of the Custodes and Space Marines stood at the main hall's entrance. The Sentinels and Iron Men stood at the waiting hall's entrance, their eyes fixed on the Imperium's personnel, ready for a fight at any moment. The black-armored Destruction Warriors and the red-robed Adeptus Mechanicus personnel stood in the middle, a grim line of neutrality. The silence was a tightened bowstring, ready to unleash a storm. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was not so tense. The emperor brought out a bottle of wine, a precious vintage from ancient Terra. Taste it, he commanded, Orthera Bordeaux red wine, mellow and moving, aged 30,000 inches. They sat in chairs, wine glasses on the small table between them, like old friends. The emperor held a glass, leaned back in the comfortable seat, and even crossed his legs. Not to disappoint him, Blaskowitz raised his glass and sipped the crimson liquid. It was indeed mellow and extraordinary. Machines are peril incarnate, the emperor intoned, his voice a thunderous echo that carried the weight of ages. The treachery of abominable intelligences sundered mankind's golden dawn and cast it into ruin. He reclined upon the seat, eyes burning with a light both ancient and mournful, like dying stars remembering their birth. I have walked among your kind since the crude fires of the Neolithic, a phantom amidst the tribes, watching you claw your way from mud and blood to the splendor of the stars. I dreamed of a species ascendant, a dominion eternal, yet always I feared its undoing at the hands of the four. Blaskowitz stood silent, as a mortal should before a god unburdening his truth. I warned my immortal kin of the warp's insidious rot, yet their ears were deaf, their wills weak. So I abandoned them. Alone, amidst the brilliance of that forgotten age, I forged my vigil. I prepared for the coming of the dark gods. A sound left his lips, no mirth, only a hollow echo of it, dry as dust. I foresaw the doom of man, but not the knife that would strike first. Not the soulless treason of the machine mind. You cannot comprehend that age, child. It was madness given form, terror-clad in steel, the epic of man's near extinction. Blaskowitz remained silent, still listening quietly, occasionally sipping the red wine. The emperor touched his chest, the gesture heavy as the weight of millennia. His voice carried the sorrow of a god bound by duty. I bore witness as man and machine, once united in triumph, tore their own empire asunder, grinding glory into ash and bone. And I, his tone darkened, I could do nothing. A sigh escaped him, vast as the void. Powerless, I watched as mankind slid screaming into the abyss. So, when I forged the Imperium, I decreed with iron law, no thinking machine shall ever rise again. Better to endure hardship than to gamble with annihilation. His gaze, sharp as a blade, fixed upon Blaskowitz. Humanity will suffer, yes, but it will endure. That is the price of survival. The Emperor lifted his chalice, crimson light catching the rim like blood upon a blade. You, child of my choosing, must grasp this burden. You must see the weight I carry, for it is a burden I intend for you to share. Blaskowitz listened, nodding repeatedly. He understood why the creator of this Imperium deeply loathed intelligent machines. He had not lived through that era and would not judge the Emperor. He was a silent observer. The events were just words on paper, and words could not convey the bloodiness of history. He also felt the Emperor's love, not for individuals, but for the human race. Everything the Emperor did was for the survival of humanity. Blaskowitz realized that he and the Emperor were the same kind. Both regarded chaos as the ultimate enemy. What about the loyal artificial intelligences? Blaskowitz asked. Without their help, could we have won? The malicious betrayal of some machines was real, but so was the unwavering loyalty of others. They fought on the front lines, giving humanity time to breathe. The Emperor drank deeply, the crimson wine catching the chamber's dying light like a pool of spilt blood. He did not speak, the truth required no defense. Your iron hand over the Machinican has stilled future insurrections, Blaskowitz admitted, his voice tempered, respectful before the ancient titan before him. On this, I stand with you. But his gaze did not falter. Yet I hold to my own creed. The newer stars will serve as a crucible, a chance for the loyal. As my father once offered me a path to redemption, so too shall I extend it to those artificial minds that bend their will to mankind. Let the faithful serve, even if forged of steel and code, so long as their hearts, he paused, a ghost of defiance in his tone, beat for humanity. After both sides expressed their opinions, the opulent parlor fell silent, with the leaders of two nations contemplating the outcome of their dialogue. So, does this count as a failed negotiation? The Emperor suddenly asked. We both have our own convictions and won't abandon what we believe to be correct. Not exactly, Blaskowitz replied, giving a balanced answer. We merely exchanged views. The Emperor nodded. It had been a long time since he had such an equal exchange. In the Imperium, everyone had to follow his path to avoid mistakes. Even Horus, his most beloved son. Blaskowitz was different. To the Emperor, he was not a son, but a unique gift. He was the most trustworthy person, and on major strategic directions, the two were in alignment. How is your newer stars? The Emperor did not dwell on the AI issue. May my assistant answer. Blaskowitz gently touched his armor. Professional matters should be handled by professionals. The Emperor shook his head, a silent concession. Central Lexicon Sophia greets you. Sophia's holographic figure reappeared. Tell the Lord of the Imperium of Man about our home. Sophia bowed, her manner rational and grand. She projected images throughout the parlor, showcasing the newer stars. The Emperor watched Sophia. As a dispassionate digital life form, her narration was full of passion. He also saw that under Blaskowitz's rule, machines were endowed with personality. The humans of the newer stars lived in abundance, with material concerns no longer an issue. The relationship between machines and humans was more harmonious than during the Age of Progress. You may withdraw. The Emperor dismissed Sophia. Blaskowitz closed the terminal. He saw the solemn expression on the Emperor's face. Blaskowitz. The Emperor sat up, his face grave. Do you know about the imperial truth? Blaskowitz knew about it, a packaged lie. How do you view it? The Emperor asked. A benevolent lie, necessary for the current Imperium. Blaskowitz summarized. Its ultimate purpose, to unite humanity, eliminate blind faith, and weaken chaos, influence in reality. Yes. The Emperor admitted. Regarding chaos, you must keep it a strict secret. I know that. Blaskowitz wholeheartedly agreed. Aren't you afraid that one day, when the soldiers who fought for the imperial truth realize it was a lie, their inner pillars will collapse? Blaskowitz reminded him. So, they cannot be allowed to know. The Emperor's expression was iron. Chaos corruption is omnipresent. The thoughts of any intelligent being who knows of them are a source of their power. Religion and worship are natural fertile grounds for chaos and must be completely eradicated. Blaskowitz nodded. What about Horus? Have you told him? No. The Emperor shook his head. Besides you, Malkador, and Valder, I haven't told anyone. You should tell him, Blaskowitz countered. He has the right to know about the existence of chaos and to prepare to fight them. Blaskowitz understood the Noor stars and Imperium's fundamental difference. Many in the Noor stars' high echelons knew about chaos. They even summoned demons for study. No, the Emperor shook his head, his tone firm as iron. I have reasons why I must do this. It concerns the survival of the Imperium. The Emperor could tell Blaskowitz everything, but not this. He could not tell him that his sons originated from a deal with the Chaos Gods. Blaskowitz might accept it. But Horus and the others. The Emperor felt that if they knew too early, the Great Crusade would fail. And the most important point, the deal with the Chaos Gods explicitly stated that half of the Primarchs belonged to them. Horus could betray him. Only Blaskowitz, who vowed to slay the Chaos Gods, would never break his oath. Who is your ultimate enemy? Two different voices, yet speaking in unison, a unique tacit agreement. All indications suggested their mutual enemy was chaos, yet they still hoped for the most accurate answer. Blaskowitz and the Emperor exchanged smiles. I am the enemy of chaos. The Emperor's every action was to fight chaos. Blaskowitz's goal might not be as grand, but his ultimate target was also chaos. Their starting points were different, but their ultimate goal was the same. The Emperor was unwilling to lose Blaskowitz, this powerful trump card. Let's go, they've been waiting outside for a long time. As the side hall doors opened, the Master of Mankind and Blaskowitz looked relaxed. Horus was the first to greet them, father, brother. The Master of Mankind raised his hand, resting it on Horus' arm, gently patting him to silence his questions, and surveyed the hall, frustrated by the animosity between them. The negotiation hall. Valder spoke, precisely conveying the Master of Mankind's will. Blaskowitz cast a reassuring glance at the Sentinels and Turing, signaling for them to follow. Valder looked at the Martian Mechanicus Elder, informed the Fabricator General of Mars that the Master of Mankind requires his presence. Sir, the Mechanicus Elder replied, his voice a mechanical blend. I have already informed the Fabricator General 123 minutes and 11 seconds ago. His bionic appendages twitched from electrical overload. Praise the Omniscia. He had already seen what was to come. Blaskowitz cast an unexpected glance at the red-robed cyborg. He knew that was one of the Imperial Aquila's heads, the Martian Adeptus Mechanicus. The Master of Mankind glanced at the Mechanicus Elder and led the way. He needed to quickly define the relationship with the Noor stars. The hall was solemn, with sculptures symbolizing peace and trust. A colossal square table stood beneath a towering dome. Once the Argent Noor and Imperium personnel were in place, the vermilion doors opened again, and a 10-meter-tall mechanical construct squeezed its way through. He was clad in red robes, with mechanical tentacles wriggling beneath his body. The Fabricator General's upper body held a forging axe, only his face retained human flesh. He's a bit too extreme, Turing whispered to Harlan. Only half of his brain is flesh. He is indeed a bit too extreme, Harlan nodded. At the square table, the Imperium's members were in the center, Argent Noor's personnel on the left, and the Adeptus Mechanicus on the right. The Destroyer Legion stood behind their Gene Father, stating their allegiance. Today, my master has made an important decision, Valder began. A third party needs to be introduced, the Noor Stars, an empire of stars ruled by a son of the Master of Mankind. He will lead the Noor Stars into the alliance, providing support to the Imperium and enjoying equal rights with the Imperium. He looked at the Martian Adeptus Mechanicus, awaiting the Fabricator General's response. Horus' eyes widened, then quickly calmed down. He had long found the eccentric oilmongers of Mars irritating. He enjoyed seeing Mars put in a difficult position. Malkador was not surprised. To unite this hope, the Master of Mankind would try every means. This is impossible. The Fabricator General's voice was a cold, modulated command, rejecting the Imperium's demand. He projected the Olympus Protocol from his palm. Mars has the right to dispose of a portion of the relic technology. A son of the Master of Mankind is part of the Imperium. The technological relics he brings back are rightfully shared by Mars. There is no three-party agreement. There has always only been the Imperium and the Martian Adeptus Mechanicus. The Fabricator General rejected the Master of Mankind's proposal. Although he revered the Master of Mankind, the Adeptus Mechanicus was a vital part of the Great Crusade. The Master of Mankind said nothing, looking towards Blaskowitz. His gesture was clear. To gain a firm footing in the Imperium, one needed to demonstrate strength. If one lacked the capital, they would be devoured. The Noor Stars agreed to an alliance with the Imperium, enjoying equal rights. Blaskowitz spoke as if he hadn't heard the Fabrikatorgeneral's rejection, stating the rights Argent Noor should enjoy. The relic technology and STC templates excavated during the Great Crusade, Argent Noor has the right to possess. In return, Argent Noor can participate in the Great Crusade. If you lack warships, you can consider the ancient warships we manufacture, which are more advanced than your current ones. He signaled Sophia to project images, which displayed warships and weapons whose performance was far superior to the Imperium's. Wait a moment. The Fabrikatorgeneral's cold logical thinking finally became disordered. Master of mankind, you cannot betray the interests of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Adeptus Mechanicus providing weapons was the most fundamental binding interest. Argent Noor's proposal was digging at the roots. The Master of Mankind looked at him, and Valder spoke. Our cooperation is based on an equal relationship. We are not bound by the agreement, and the Imperium has the right to choose what is better. Blaskowitz smiled. He understood this was a father-son game, forcing Mars to make concessions. Since the Adeptus Mechanicus made the first move, Blaskowitz was very willing to weaken them. The Noor stars can join, and can even acquire Adeptus Mechanicus technology, but they cannot provide weapons to the Imperium. The Fabricator General was silent, calculating, also wanting to retain interests. We will provide more weapons to the Imperium. In return, Mars requires research into artificial intelligence. No. No. A simultaneous refusal from Blaskowitz and Valder echoed in the hall. Argent Noor retains ownership of all artificial intelligence technology and demands that the Adeptus Mechanicus provide and surrender the sealed technology. Blaskowitz looked at the Fabricator General. Furthermore, the Adeptus Mechanicus is not allowed to infringe upon any of Argent Noor's rights. Argent Noor has priority. This is impossible. The Fabricator General was furious, his upper body rising from the tabletop. Mars can make concessions, but not continuously. HMPH. Blaskowitz snorted coldly and opened communications with the Void Wanderer. Let the general see if he should make concessions. Turing's cold voice mocked, and holographic projections shot from his eyes. Freak, look at this. The Fabricator General watched as the enormous relic warship aimed its bow at Mars, its gunports opening. The Fabrikatorgeneral's remaining human pupils contracted for 0.3 seconds. Is this a show of force? Even more disdainfully, the might of Mars cannot be subdued by a single warship. Is that so? Then take a good look. To the front, upper left of the Void Wanderer, a giant hexagonal grid opened, revealing the hidden cannon barrels within. A circular muzzle, 100 square kilometers in size, began to channel energy. The ship's main cannon began to channel the energy of a blue giant star. Dimensional channel locked, energy stream firing. As Turing reported, the endless energy from the blue giant star erupted. A visible blue energy line, traveling at superluminal speed, flew towards Mars. The imprisoned wrath of the blue sun would no longer be contained. No. 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 The immense energy stream had exceeded the Fabrikatorgeneral's calculations. His brain and processor had crashed. The blue energy stream grazed past Mars, not even hitting it, yet it overloaded all of the planet's shields. Mars now looked like a young girl, with her gates wide open, vulnerable to all. If it had hit directly, Mars would have been utterly destroyed. The furious energy was unleashed for 60 seconds, and the negotiation hall was also silent for 60 seconds, everyone watching the powerful firepower, turning their heads in awe. Negotiate. Everything is negotiable. The Fabricator General sat back down, his tone less cold, with a touch more humanity. I love the Imperium very much, and I love Argent Noor even more. Mars is willing to contribute more to the Imperium, and even more willing to engage in deep cooperation with Argent Noor. The terror of a single cannon shot was such that it established a three-party cooperation. The Imperium and Mars deepened their cooperation, with Mars providing more weapons and technical support for the Imperium's forge worlds. Argent Noor maintained its independence and freedom, receiving technological data from both the Imperium and Mars, with both parties providing Argent Noor with continuous basic industrial materials. The three parties, in the Sacred Hall, added countless detailed clauses, finally signing the agreement, the Stars Protocol. The Noor stars had demonstrated the necessary power, leading to a successful negotiation. Mars bled, paying a staggering price in technology and influence. The Imperium, in turn, received a bounty of unprecedented benefit. As a key participant, Argent Noor drew on the wealth of both parties, gaining boons from the Imperium and concessions from Mars. As the most independent faction, it was the undeniable victor. When the dust settled, the imperial aquila remained a symbol of unwavering duality, its two heads locked in a symmetrical stance. But a new brand was seared into the eagle's heart, the crimson rune of Argent Noor, a mark of the warrior king, now burned on the aquila's chest. In addition to the imperial aquila's solemn salute and the adeptus mechanicus cogwheel gesture, a warrior's salute was now added to imperial common etiquette. A simple, powerful gesture, kneeling on one knee, left hand pressed to the chest. It was the salute of Argent Noor's warrior civilization. With all matters settled, Blaskowitz was ready to return to the Noor stars, to continue his campaign of conquest. But the emperor drew him aboard his flagship, the Bucephalus. He invited his son to embark on a new journey, to meet another brother, one yet to return to Terra. Blaskowitz led 10 Doom Slayers to accompany the emperor to the planet Fenris, arranging for the rest of his Genisons to receive ideological education as warriors back in Argent Noor. Though they were peerless warriors with souls of adamantium, Blaskowitz insisted they undergo the rigorous cultural training of the warrior civilization. For future wars, Blaskowitz's positioning was multi-arms integrated combat, rather than a single tactical application. He also held another expectation for his superhuman offspring: they should utilize their superhuman minds to act as battlefield nodes, using their psychic link talent to serve as command nodes in large-scale troop engagements. Blaskowitz divided the Doom Slayers into groups of 3. These powerful warriors had to become versatile. Blaskowitz, as the Legion's eldest son, reluctantly left his father's side to receive new training, but he insisted on leaving 10 men for Blaskowitz, as the Genofathers, honor guard. Aboard the ship, the Emperor stood in his command chamber, gazing at the warp outside the viewport. He spoke with a deep voice, a note of awe in his tone. I have never seen the warp so placid. Though demons and filth feared him and would not approach his vessel, the chaotic tides of the warp were always turbulent. Yet now, the path ahead of the ship was like a still pool. The Emperor hoped that Blaskowitz's offspring would inherit this talent. Blaskowitz shook his head. The warp was so docile before him, as if deliberately retreating from his very presence. Compared to unknown secrets, he was quite unaccustomed to imperial ships. Even the Emperor's flagship exuded a heavy, steel-forged sensation. With the strongest psyker and the strongest warrior present, the Bucephalus Geller field was not activated. Blaskowitz unhooked the crucible sword from his waist, preparing to toss it back into the raging sea of souls. May I see it? The Emperor was very curious about the god-slaying weapon in Blaskowitz's hand, a weapon that surpassed artifacts and even made him feel a sense of trepidation. Blaskowitz did not refuse. He simply smiled. Lightly gripping the hilt, the god-slaying blade sprang out. Blaskowitz held the hilt with 2 fingers, easily handing the crucible sword to the Emperor. You had better be careful, it's sharp. Blaskowitz offered a gentle warning, his inner self laughing at the irony. The Emperor's hand closed on the hilt, and immediately a searing agony shot through him. Black smoke rose from his flesh as if it were being corroded by a godblight. The custodes watched with furrowed brows. The Doom Slayers, however, watched with relish. The Emperor's arm cracked beneath the psychic flames, his muscles, sheathed in golden robes, tensed from the pain. Yet he did not release his grip. Let go. The Emperor's voice was a strained whisper. His psychic energy was being burned away, his hand aflame, but he would not yield. You must hold on tight. If you lose your grip, this warship will be destroyed. Blaskowitz warned him seriously. The powerful concept of the crucible sword would erase all existence it touched. The Emperor nodded, still wanting to try if he could wield it. The moment Blaskowitz let go, the Emperor immediately gripped the hilt, but a flame immediately traveled up his sword-wielding arm, burning his flesh until it split open. His psychic power immediately dissipated, and the Emperor revealed his true form, the flames extinguished. He placed both hands on the hilt, but he felt the sword growing heavier and heavier. The Emperor was surprised, continuously increasing his strength, but he could only slightly shake the crucible sword, finding it difficult to wield this powerful weapon. Blaskowitz caught the weapon the moment it slipped from his grasp, preventing the crucible sword from killing the very concept of the warship. The Emperor restored his radiant image, the burns on his arm instantly healing. Only a warrior such as yourself, he said with a sigh of regret, can wield a weapon that makes gods tremble. Blaskowitz took back the crucible sword and casually threw it back into the warp, letting it hunt demons. After this small interlude, the two sides seemed to have fewer barriers between them. On the way to Fenris, Blaskowitz and the Emperor conversed in the palace of the Bucephalus, discussing some future plans. They were not afraid of the 4 gods eavesdropping, instead, they spoke freely. Blaskowitz also learned that the warp was relatively calm now. The scream of Slaanesha's birth had extinguished the warp storms. During this precious window of opportunity, the Emperor had to complete the Great Crusade and proceed with his next plan. Blaskowitz finally understood why this Emperor was so eager to seize the stars. Greedily taking the stars into his possession, seizing all resources to support the Great Crusade. When the Bucephalus passed from the warp and arrived in the Fenris system, a lone Imperial warship was already waiting. A group of Space Marines in 5th Legion power armor boarded the Bucephalus and came before the Emperor. Blaskowitz immediately noticed something was amiss. This band of warriors was not the 5th Legion. They wore the white power armor, but they were taller, and their very bearing was alien. He even spotted a Primarch, a being who should have been impossible to miss, standing inconspicuously among the Legion soldiers. It's that imposter. A psychic prompt from a Doom Slayer echoed in his mind. He has been lurking in our Legion for a long time, faking his death and disappearing without a trace, and now he has appeared here again. He returned earlier than Horus Lupercal, and has even been living on Terra all this time. The Emperor concealed his existence. Blaskowitz nodded knowingly and no longer paid attention to him. Alpharius, hidden in the crowd, felt the newly returned brother's gaze pierce his flawless disguise the moment their eyes met. That Alcyon gaze sent shivers down Alpharius' spine, and he, casually, turned his body to avoid his brother's gaze. Fortunately, that seemingly calm, yet extremely sharp gaze quickly moved on. The 5th Legion warriors immediately knelt before the Emperor and Blaskowitz, expressing their most basic respect. Blaskowitz watched, laughing inwardly. A brother disguised as a Space Marine knelt before him without hesitation, which was a bit amusing. Are you sure? The Emperor, who had also recognized Alpharius, allowed the play to continue. His focus was on the intelligence they provided. Confirmed, it is a Primarch. The Legion warrior opened a holographic projection, which contained a summary of the planet they had observed. A frozen planet, a death world, known as Fenris. The locals there had adapted to the extreme cold and stubbornly survived, forming a unique culture. Years ago, a Primarch's amniotic pod had landed in the wilderness, and he had been adopted by a pack of wolves. The locals had captured him and his wolf brothers, and accepted the savage Primarch. Now he had integrated into local society and united the tribes. Blaskowitz watched with relish, as if witnessing another life story unfold. You may leave, the Emperor said to the impostor, his gaze lingering on the true Primarch. He then threw a heavy cloak to Blaskowitz. Come down with me. 1 comments 0 vote. Wolf. Wind and frost. Besides that, there was a biting chill. This was Fenris, not the legendary lush greenery, but only the bone-chilling wind and endless frost. The world of Fenris, a planet almost eternally frozen, where summers were short and intense. Summers were brief and violent. When volcanoes erupted, the icebound surface cracked in the searing heat, and magma, laden with meltwater, shifted tectonic plates. The ice islands and floating continents of the frozen sea, alternating between summer melting and winter winds, meant the geography was constantly changing, never the same year after year. The people of Fenris, like rock thorns on the ice plains, took root amidst the tearing winds and snow, stubbornly surviving. On the ever-changing frost, they constantly vied for living space. They vied with humans, with monsters left over from ancient times, and with packs of wild wolves. A few years ago, a human tribe discovered a strange, wolf-skinned creature. It lived with a wolf pack, behaving like a werewolf. The werewolf and its wolf brothers attacked the tribe, and eventually, the wolf pack suffered heavy losses and fled in disarray. To cover the wolf pack's retreat, the werewolf and its wolf brothers stayed behind to fight the human hunting party. They were eventually captured. The people subdued the werewolf. As it bared its fangs, threatening the crowd, they used long spears to pull back its wolf skin. The true face of the strange creature astonished the hunting party. It was a naked human. He was extraordinarily strong, his limbs and torso powerful with muscle. His toes and fingers were as sharp as a beast's, his face wrinkled with anger, tusks grew from his mouth, and wolf's mane sprouted from his cheeks. People were astonished by his form, yet they still brought him back to the tribe and gradually accepted him. The tribal chief named him Leman Russ, meaning Russ love. Russ quickly learned human language and, with his 2 wolf brothers, survived among the humans. In the eyes of the wild wolves, humans were no different from them, they were a kind of kin. After the shattering of the Golden Age, to resist Fenris' harsh natural environment, humans injected themselves with the wolf's helix. Those who did not succumb to bestiality and successfully endured gained bestial strength, allowing them to withstand the storms. The failures, whose minds were consumed by wildness, became the wild wolves of the Fenris ice plains. Russ gradually displayed his talents as a primarch, instructing the Russ tribe's blacksmiths in forging and leading warriors in campaigns across the land. Through repeated conquests, Russ earned respect and was fully accepted and embraced by the humans. Before the tribal chief died, he appointed Russ as his successor to continue leading the tribe. Under Russ' leadership, the Russ tribe unified half the hemisphere, becoming the true overlord of Fenris. Today, the tribe was exceptionally lively. A grand raid had seized a large amount of supplies, and the people were celebrating another victory. Leman Russ laughed boisterously in the tribal hall, his hearty laughter drowning out everyone else's conversations. He was at the very center of the feast, his enormous physique drawing attention, while behind him, his wolf brothers devoured meat, showing expressions of enjoyment. The Primarch was the center of the feast. All warriors and attendants drank Fenrisian spirits and heartily ate fat-rich roasted meat. Since Russ took power, he had led his warriors to hunt giant beasts, killing previously unconquerable creatures, ensuring the tribe enjoyed abundant food even in winter. No leader could ever surpass him, the great wolf, Leman Russ. Because of his existence, Fenris winters no longer inspired fear, but were merely a comfortable wait before the arrival of summer. Russ drank the strong liquor heartily and chewed down large mouthfuls of roasted meat. The amount of meat and liquor he consumed far exceeded the total of all the warriors combined. He thoroughly enjoyed everything in the present, expressing himself freely and joyfully, without needing to care too much. Russ' wolf-like instincts were keen. He acutely perceived all the external expressions and internal psychological activities of everyone in the banquet hall. Someone slapped a serving girl's shapely bottom, causing the girl to shriek in surprise and quickly leave. It wasn't excessive. The warrior and the girl had an ambiguous relationship, she just hadn't expected the sudden attack and shrieked in embarrassed indignation as she fled. The faces of the warriors returning from the raid were flushed red, clearly drunk by several others. They jumped onto the round tables, spittle flying, recounting how they had beheaded enemies. His actions were wild and intense, boasting of his achievements, and though there was a suspicion of exaggeration, it still ignited the atmosphere of the feast. In the dim corners of the banquet hall, several warriors, red-faced, were still arguing over the spoils of war, and the tension between them gradually increased. Russ drank a large gulp of strong liquor, then picked up a sizzling, oily roasted rib in front of him and casually tossed it in front of them. The roasted meat falling from the sky made the arguing men jump up, immediately abandoning their quarrel and turning to find out who had thrown the meat. Come here. Eat meat and wrestle. The men saw Russ beckoning to them, immediately put aside their unpleasantness, and gathered around him. Wrestle. Russ urged impatiently. He loved wrestling, and the first skill he learned in the human tribe was wrestling. Under his impatient urging, several warriors walked to the center of the banquet hall and began to grapple with each other. The men vented their frustrations during the brawling, wrestling until their noses were bruised and faces swollen, but their conflicts were completely resolved. Beneath Russ' savage exterior lay keen intuition and a clear mind. His seemingly careless and barbaric demands were, in Fenrisian fashion, a way to unite his warrior brothers. He was very satisfied with the current atmosphere, narrowing his eyes in enjoyment, watching the intense and carefree laughter. Yet, in the depths of the great wolf's eyes, a profound calm was hidden. Amidst the laughter and the curses of wrestling, the atmosphere of the feast gradually reached its climax, promising another sleepless night. What Russ didn't know was that on the ice plains of Fenris, two figures, one tall and one short, were walking through the snowstorm, gradually approaching his tribe. Their cloaks were lifted by the cold wind. Undaunted by the Fenrisian night, they steadily advanced through the snow-covered wilderness. These were the Emperor and Blaskowitz, who had descended from the Emperor's dream to Fenris. The raging wind and snow could not shake the two transcendent beings. The giant beasts of the wilderness trembled, fearing their powerful aura. Blaskowitz wore a suit of unpowered light armor. His combat boots trod on the snow. His waist had only a simple skirt-like armor, leaving his thighs and upper body bare. His heroic face, in the shadow of his cloak's hood, revealed only half of his chin. He was quite curious about the Emperor. Before departing, the Emperor wore a true suit of armor, but now he only wore a robe. While his stature had shrunk, his figure looked extremely gaunt. Why this method? Blaskowitz asked, his voice cutting through the wind and snow, clearly reaching the Emperor's ears. A landing craft could have descended directly to the tribe, negotiations could have been conducted just as well. He now somewhat understood that the impostor who enjoyed role-playing games might have often been by the Emperor's side, learning such bad habits by constant exposure. Long-term solitary life, or life as an adopted child, your brothers, like you, have developed independent personalities. The Emperor, holding the edge of his hood with one hand to prevent it from being blown off by the wind, explained the initial intention of their action to Blaskowitz. I hope to foster some affection through a bit of interaction. To increase our mutual understanding. Perhaps it will be useful, Blaskowitz said noncommittally, maintaining a neutral stance on the Emperor's interaction, neither denying nor supporting it, preferring to observe first before drawing conclusions. As they spoke, the two arrived at the entrance of Russ' tribe. The tribal guards at the gate were inside the guardhouse, drinking and eating meat by the dim yellow light. The two figures quickly caught the attention of the guards, especially Blaskowitz's physique, which made the guards instinctively tighten their grip on their weapons. The guards, with spears and battle axes in hand, rushed out of the guardhouse and sternly demanded, "Who are you?" The newcomers were mysterious, wearing concealing cloaks. They certainly didn't look like good people. The tall figure was even taller than Russ. No need to be nervous, the slightly shorter one spoke. He took off his hood, revealing a dark-skinned, gaunt middle-aged man. The peace and inclusiveness in his words made the guards lower their guard. We come from afar, travelers passing through, hoping to rest our feet here. The guards nodded repeatedly, somewhat convinced. On the Fenrisian wilderness, where monsters and wolf packs roamed, the fact that these two could travel safely naturally meant they possessed extraordinary abilities. They were highly skilled, yet they made no excessive moves. Their words, on the contrary, were very polite. I'll take them to see Russ. The guard gestured to his companion. He would take the strangers to see Russ and wasn't afraid of any unusual moves from them. Russ' strength would resolve everything. Come with me, strangers. The guard's eyes constantly roamed over Blaskowitz's body. Russ should be able to take him on, right? What if he couldn't? If Russ couldn't handle it, what else could be done? The tribe would just surrender. Any more sacrifices would be meaningless. Blaskowitz remained silent, learning the language of Fenris. Although the Imperium and Argent Nur were half a galaxy apart, their linguistic heritage was the same, stemming from the High Gothic of the Golden Age. Despite thousands of years separating their encounters, language communication presented no obstacles. The language of Fenris had degenerated, becoming one of countless dialects officially designated as Low Gothic by the Imperium. On the spaceship, Blaskowitz had read the planetary data provided by the impostor and listened to relevant recordings, memorizing some terminology. Now, he took advantage of the Emperor's conversation to rapidly learn the Fenrisian language. As for the Emperor, his psychic power was immense. Any language he spoke would be the true language that others could understand. The two were soon led by guards to the center of the tribe, hearing the distant revelry and clamor of the feast. Laughter and curses merged, creating a wild roar, occasionally punctuated by the howls of wolves, as if they had arrived at a primitive tribe where humans and beasts coexisted. Blaskowitz's nostrils twitched, catching the smells around the hall, sweat mixed with grease, and even the stench of wolf feces. He widened his eyes for a moment, then smiled and shook his head in understanding. He could choose not to understand, but he had to show respect. He would follow the advice of the warrior's law, observe first, then offer opinions. The Emperor merely shook his head, showing no signs of disgust. The primitive eras he had experienced were 100 times more harsh than the current environment. To Russ, the strongest warrior of Fenris. May you conquer the storm. The feast was at its climax, with Fenrisian warriors offering praise and blessings to their ruler. Blaskowitz and the Emperor exchanged glances. Led by the guards, they politely pushed open the large doors. The moment the doors opened, the boisterous atmosphere of the banquet hall gradually cooled, and all eyes converged on the entrance. A giant stood at the doorway, cloaked and exceedingly tall, with a mysterious runic symbol on his chest, standing there, surveying the hall. The Fenrisians' gazes went back and forth between the mysterious giant and Russ, subconsciously comparing the sizes of the two towering figures. Ultimately, they concluded that Russ was slightly inferior. The never-before-seen giant at the door was estimated to be 5 meters tall, while Russ was only 4 meters, not as burly as him. Russ, who had been leaning back, sat up straight in his chair, also staring at the tall figure. His wild instincts told him that the giant before him was an insurmountable presence. Blaskowitz also saw the man on the massive chair. His face had a wild, unbridled look, with sharp canine teeth and wolf's mane growing from his jowls. His eyes were the tawny yellow of a beast, as sharp and dangerous as a wolf's. Yet, Blazkowicz sensed a calmness, a wisdom hidden beneath the savage exterior, and a unique, steadfast soul. Outsiders. Leman Russ stared intently at the giant, unconsciously straightening his back, yet casually picked up a piece of roasted meat in front of him and brought it to his mouth. We are outsiders from afar, travelers passing through. Eyes drawn to the tall figure, they heard an unusually calm voice and then saw another person standing beside him. The cloaked companion was a slender, brown-skinned middle-aged man. Travelers. Russ rubbed his chin, his eyes constantly looking at the self-proclaimed traveler, clearly not believing it. However, the middle-aged man raised his voice so that everyone in the banquet hall could hear. I do not agree that he is the strongest warrior. Let alone this one beside me. The middle-aged man pointed to the tall figure, then to himself, you can't even defeat me. As soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, a huge burst of laughter erupted in the banquet hall. Ha 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 ha. The Fenrisians roared with laughter as if they had heard a joke, their spittle and strong liquor dampening their thick beards. The guards who had led the two in merely retreated to the side. He thought this person was a bit off. He said he came in to rest his feet and get some hot wine to warm himself, but after a few words, he started looking for trouble. Russ also laughed, his laughter hollow and prolonged, like the howl of a lone wolf under the moon. He found the person in front of him amusing. The first half of his statement was debatable, as the tall figure was indeed very dangerous, but the second half was utterly presumptuous. If I defeat you, will you submit to me? The middle-aged man asked again, with a mysterious confidence. Blazkowicz's thick eyebrows furrowed under his hood. The Emperor's interaction was indeed a bit amusing. If showing up and demanding the host's submission counted as interaction, then the Emperor was doing quite well. How about this, outsider? Russ ran both hands through his golden hair, tidying it, and looked at the two outsiders. According to Fenrisian tradition, we will have 3 trials. 3 trials. Eating, drinking, and strength. If you can defeat me, I will submit to you. What do you say? Russ, wild, beast-like eyes fixed on the tall warrior who had not yet spoken. All right. I will compete with you in eating and drinking. The Emperor pointed to himself, then to Blazkowicz, he will compete with you in strength. No problem, outsider. Russ stood up from his chair, looking at the outsiders with full confidence. Leman Russ accepts all challenges. Perhaps he was lacking in martial prowess, but when it came to eating and drinking, Russ feared no one. No, Blazkowicz shook his head, rejecting the Emperor's proposal, and said in slightly unfamiliar Fenrisian, I am not good at fighting. I will compete with you in eating and drinking, and he will compete with you in strength. Boo. At these words, the Fenrisians booed loudly, banging on the tables, mocking the big man as all show and no substance, despite his large build. What did he mean, not good at fighting? Just his physique standing there, the sheer oppressive presence could scare someone to death. The Emperor looked up and sideways at Blazkowicz, who was wearing a hood, and realized he had no intention of cooperating, and shook his head helplessly. Not good at fighting. Who in the universe could contend with him? No problem, I can accept that. Leman Russ grinned, showing his canine teeth, pleased. Defeating the big man in eating and drinking, and the small man in strength, victory was within reach. Bring on the ale. Russ let out a low growl, announcing the official start of the trials. Blazkowicz pulled back his hood and sat at a long table opposite Russ, a mysterious smile on his face, anticipating the strong liquor and roasted meat. Russ and the Fenrisians were also momentarily stunned by the big man's heroic face, and the serving women in the banquet hall blushed profusely, swaying their slender waists and frequently casting alluring glances. They all shook their heads, saying that a powerful big man with a heroic face claiming he wasn't good at fighting was not to be believed for a single word. The Emperor also sat to the side, quietly watching their eating and drinking duel. Blazkowicz grabbed a wine barrel, a barrel that required 2 Fenrisians to lift, but in his hands, it was like an oversized cup. He took a shallow sip of the local Fenrisian ale, and a scorching warm current flowed down his throat, making his eyes light up. He glanced at the strong man carrying the ale, then looked up at Russ opposite him and said, a bit not enough. Russ looked at the gradually accumulating mountain of wine barrels beside the two, somewhat surprised by the outsider's drinking capacity. His face lit up with the excitement of a worthy opponent, and he roared with high spirits, keep bringing them. Empty all the wine cellars. On the Emperor's calm face, an eyebrow subtly raised, and his dark eyes were also stirred with a certain interest. With such a potent liquor, his body's functions would struggle to metabolize the alcohol without using his psychic powers. Prepare. There was no more space for barrels around the two giants. A warrior walked to the center and forcefully smashed a drinking cup. Start. At the word, start, the two Primarchs began their drinking competition. Blazkowicz tilted his head back, aligning his mouth and throat, and used both hands to grab a barrel and pour it directly down. His drinking style was even wilder. The extraordinarily potent liquor flowed like a waterfall from his mouth to his throat and then to his stomach. In just a blink of an eye, a dozen empty barrels were already discarded beside him, leaving the Fenrisians wide-eyed. Amazing. The Fenrisians cheered, captivated by this wildness, screaming for the outsider's straightforwardness. Russ' eyes were red. He too used both hands simultaneously, grabbing barrels and pouring them into his mouth, drinking heartily while observing the outsider. Fierce. The Fenrisians present continuously shouted and screamed, watching the two extraordinary warriors guzzle the liquor, hot as magma, which made their blood boil. Bring me a vat. Seeing himself falling behind, Russ roared, seizing the moment, and had the Fenrisian warriors bring up large vats, he was about to exert himself. He leaned over into the vat, with people continuously pouring wine into it. The Primarch's throat was like a high-powered pump, and a whirlpool even appeared on the surface of the liquor in the vat. Too strong. The crowd exclaimed, covering their faces to avoid excessive excitement. Puffs of white smoke rose from Russ' body as his bodily functions operated at full capacity, expelling alcohol from his skin to prevent his brain from becoming intoxicated. Blazkowicz caught sight of this scene from the corner of his eye. He had to find a way to break the stalemate. Their competition wasn't about drinking capacity. A Primarch's physique made it impossible to get drunk. Instead, it was about who could consume more strong liquor before the alcohol ran out. The goal of the competition was simple. The one who drank more strong liquor before the supply ran out would be the ultimate winner. As Blazkowicz chugged his drink, he subtly sent a distress signal with his eyes to the only ally in the arena, the Emperor. Upon receiving Blazkowicz's gaze, the Emperor immediately understood it was his cue to act. He raised his palm, and an invisible force lifted the mountain-sized wine barrels into the air. With a phantom grip, he crushed all of them. The liquor inside gushed out. The Emperor enveloped the liquid in golden psyker power, then waved his hand to separate the barrel fragments. The fire-colored strong liquor, encased in a layer of bubbles, floated steadily before Blazkowicz. Blazkowicz smiled in approval, giving the Emperor a thumbs-up before immediately plunging his head into the liquid bubble. He sucked in fiercely, like a kunpeng swallowing the sea, vigorously drawing the potent fine wine from the psyker power foam, a swirling vortex extending from his mouth. The Fenrisians had stopped their screaming, staring wide-eyed at the scene. The two giant wolves were equally astonished. They stretched their tongues, widened their eyes, and rolled and writhed on the ground, expressing a shock that came from their very souls. Only two superhumans in the hall made swallowing sounds from their throats, like Fenrisian sea monsters gulping down seawater. White smoke billowed from their bodies, and the expelled alcohol condensed into a mist, eventually gathering into a high-concentration alcohol cloud at the hall's dome, even raining down a drizzling liquor. Mortals in the hall collapsed, intoxicated by the inhaled alcohol mist. The Emperor merely flicked his finger, and golden psyker power instantly dispersed the alcohol, saving the mortals in the hall. Russ lifted his head from the wine vat. Witnessing this, his vigilance towards the psyker master abruptly intensified. A sorcerer with such formidable power indeed had the right to challenge him. I concede. Russ saw the shattered wine barrels on the ground, far outnumbering his own, and frankly conceded without hesitation. Give me back my wine. He said to the middle-aged man, a pained expression on his face. The victor has been decided, don't waste the liquor. The Emperor nodded. With a mere flick of his finger, all the empty barrels on the ground stood upright, and the liquor from the air precisely returned to them. Blazkowicz licked his lips and nodded to Russ, without any hint of victorious pride. Shall we compete in eating next? He asked softly, calm and genuine. Russ' impression of the big man soared. This was a strong individual of great character, with a heart as vast as the ocean. Yes. Russ was willing to contend with such a strong individual, out of basic courtesy and mutual respect. Someone, roast the meat. He roared, summoning all the master grillers, and the two sides began their second round of battle. The hall was bustling with activity. Mortal warriors, barrekested, toiled in front of the grills, sweating profusely as they roasted succulent beast meat. Russ had specifically instructed that the finest meat, prepared by true masters, must be served to their distinguished guests. He and Blazkowicz continuously chewed the roasted meat, like bottomless abysses, devouring the endless supply of grilled meat. Meat was also placed before the emperor, who ate heartily, nodding in approval of the grilling technique. The digestive systems of the two primarchs before him were at their peak, converting everything they ingested into nutrients. Hard bones, metal skewers, clinging charcoal, everything was swallowed without any adverse reactions. In the eating contest, Blaskowitz and Russ looked at each other, a sense of mutual appreciation growing between them, an acknowledgement between gourmands. Blaskowitz savored the taste of hot fat bursting in his mouth, his entire being filled with happiness and satisfaction. His tongue carefully savored every ounce of rich aroma released as the muscle fibers tore apart. Come one, come all. Come one, come all. Everything went into his mouth, everything into his stomach. The functional differences between the two extraordinary beings became apparent, and the victor would soon be decided. Russ felt a sense of fullness, his body had reached its limit and could no longer store nutrients. Blaskowitz, however, was at ease, devouring roasted meat in large mouthfuls, his stomach seemingly a bottomless pit. Hiccup. Russ crunched a bone, burped as he swallowed, and generously admitted his defeat. I concede. You are too strong. He shook his head, giving Blaskowitz a thumbs up. Russ admires you. You as well. Blaskowitz swallowed the last bite of roasted meat, savoring the aftertaste, and saluted Russ. Then, next, hiccup. Russ turned his gaze to the Psyker Master, signaling the start of the final competition. The test of strength begins now. Give me a few seconds. He gently rubbed his belly and twisted his waist a few times, quickly digesting the food in his stomach. The Fenrisians gathered around. Compared to eating and drinking, combat was the main event and the crucial part of this competition. If the middle-aged man lost, the previous two contests would be called into question. How could someone without strength command obedience? Russ walked to the center of the banquet hall, raised his hand to signal the middle-aged man, and the final, most crucial round between them began. The emperor, expressionless, stepped onto the wrestling mat in the center of the banquet hall. His surface was calm as the sea, yet deep within, a storm was brewing. Both understood that victory or defeat would be decided in an instant. Russ took a deep breath. The best way to deal with a sorcerer was to charge forward and kick them hard before they could utter a spell or activate a ritual. Then, the sorcerer's defeat would be assured. He decided to go all out in this match, holding nothing back, unleashing the full power of his body. Are you ready? Blaskowitz held 2 cups, acting as the duel starter. The two individuals on the central mat simultaneously looked at Blaskowitz and nodded with great solemnity. Clink, the 2 wine cups clinked together, emitting a crisp sound, symbolizing the start of the match. Boom. In the eyes of the Fenrisians, the moment the battle began, there was a flash of golden light, and the outcome was decided. Their tribal king, the great wolf Russ, was sent flying backward, falling to the ground unconscious. Only 3 people in the arena witnessed the battle that occurred in an instant. The moment the signal sounded, Russ' body, like a hunting gray wolf, suddenly lunged towards the emperor. His speed was extreme, he intended to win with a single strike. But then he saw that the Psyker sorcerer's figure suddenly swelled, and then a golden gauntlet extended from his cloak. In that moment of stunned realization, the middle-aged man's appearance instantly transformed, his lean body became massive and majestic, radiating golden light. Russ felt a primal stir of blood kinship. As he stood bewildered, the enormous golden fist struck his face, and his vision went black. In a daze, Russ understood everything. The anomalies on Fenris days ago, the outsiders in sealed armor, observing the tribe from the shadows. At first, he thought they were invaders, until they vanished without a trace a few days prior. Now, the golden giant standing before him was his birth father, who had come to take him home. Then, his vision went black, and he fell unconscious. The Fenrisians had no time to cheer. In their astonishment, they rushed to Russ, sighed to check if his mighty body was injured. As Russ lay unconscious, the 2 Whiteman-ed giant wolves leapt onto the banquet table, lowering their bodies, arching their backs, and baring their fangs as they snarled softly at the emperor. No need to be nervous. The emperor, his form returned to that of a magnanimous man of middle age, gently waved his hand, a calming gesture to the tense Fenrisians and the 2 giant wolves. He will wake up soon, he promised, his voice a low rumble, and you will know everything. With that, he sat beside Blaskowitz, a casual, mortal figure in the face of such raw power, and drank the remaining wine from his cup, using a small knife to cut a piece of roasted meat. Seeing his lack of malice, the Fenrisians gradually lowered their guard. The 2 figures before them had defeated Russ in combat, If they had sought to harm his people, it would have already been done. Go get a bucket of ice water, Blaskowitz gravely instructed the anxious crowd. And pour it on him. It's very effective. The emperor's eyebrow quirked, a silent glance at Blaskowitz. A hint of dark wit. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and the Fenrisians obeyed. With a mighty splash, the bucket of ice water descended upon their primarch. Russ jolted, his beast-like gaze sweeping around, locking onto the one who held the bucket. Yet he did not rage. Instead, he scrambled to his feet and knelt before the emperor, a gesture that shattered the Fenrisians' expectations. Father. He choked, his voice thick with sincere emotion. I am willing to submit to you. The emperor smiled, his form once again transforming into the great, golden, power-armored figure of myth and legend. The Fenrisians, seeing the divine form, fell to their knees in reverent awe. Rise, my son, the emperor commanded, extending a golden armored hand to stroke Russ' hair. He crouched slowly, drawing his son to his feet. I have come to take you home. And just like that, a father-son reunion was concluded. Russ knew everything. The emperor had come from Terra to pick him up. It was time to leave Fenris and see the grand design of the Imperium. He brought his wolf brothers, Freki and Jerry, and his chosen warriors, boarding the magnificent void ship. In the resplendent palace of the emperor's dream, Blaskowitz sat on the steps, stroking the two Whiteman-ed giant wolves. Blaskowitz, a giant in his own right, found it as easy as a normal person petting a dog. Freki and Jerry purred with contentment, their ears twitching as they listened to the conversation between their master and the emperor. By the throne, the two conversed. The emperor enlightened Russ, explaining his existence, the state of the Imperium, and the urgency of the Great Crusade. Russ, too, marveled, learning his destiny and the great legions of Genisons created in his image. Blaskowitz heard it all, but neither interrupted nor offered an opinion. He simply listened, a quiet observer. Blaskowitz stood up and walked to the palace's viewport, squinting into the depths of the warp. Brother. A warm voice called from behind him. Russ had crept up, letting out a sudden roar. Blaskowitz turned, a slight smile on his face at his brother's goofy grin. Why the look of deep suffering? Russ asked, his joking reined in by the profound fire of hatred in his brother's eyes. I bear a monstrous blood feud. Should I set it aside for the Great Crusade? Blaskowitz did not hide his truth, confiding in Russ. Russ walked to the viewport, standing beside Blaskowitz. He asked earnestly, are the enemies very strong? Very strong, Blaskowitz nodded. Then you must participate in the Great Crusade and complete the Great Crusade. Russ turned, looking up at his magnificent brother. Complete his plan, and we brothers will help you get your revenge. Blaskowitz's heart trembled. This was the most direct solution he had ever heard, a simple, clear path. Thank you, he said softly. We are bound by blood. Helping a brother get vengeance is only right. Russ put an arm around Blaskowitz's broad shoulders. I have a question, Russ continued, changing the subject. I lost at eating and drinking. Can I beat you in a fight? No, but you can try. Blaskowitz answered gravely, with undeniable confidence. A flicker of dejection crossed Russ' face, then he was gone, to look after the Fenrisians. The Emperor's dream exited the warp, arriving at the Gate of Hades, within the solar system. Horus Lupercal had not yet left Terra, eagerly awaiting another Primarch. But when he saw them, his noble face could not maintain its composure. The Emperor had hosted a banquet, and the Fenrisians frolicked like barbarians in the hall, heedless of the setting. On the second floor, behind a one-way window, veins pulsed on Horus' bald head. He had come full of anticipation, only to see a group of barbarians urinating on the soil of Terra. He is defiling your radiance. Horus growled to his father. A flea like him shouldn't even be on Terra. He truly did not want to admit that the person urinating on the banquet hall pillar was his brother. You are wrong. Horus, maintain calm and reason, Blaskowitz said in a steady, deep voice. Father has many sons, and each is different. Moreover, he grew up alone on a death world. Blaskowitz's gaze was sharp, piercing directly into Horus' eyes. If you had fallen on Fenris, could you be civilized? Please tell me, my brother. He deliberately re-emphasized, blood. Horus was speechless. Blaskowitz's magnanimity, his use of history, struck him like a physical blow. Brother. We are bound by blood, you should show respect to every brother, Blaskowitz continued, his voice softer now. We have 20 brothers, and there will be many more different beings. Are you going to issue decrees of extermination for all of them? Enough, the Emperor, who had been silent, spoke. You should spend some time alone with Russ. The emperor led Blaskowitz out. Blaskowitz nodded to Horus, an encouraging look in his eyes. Horus watched them depart, his anger subsiding into a long sigh. He walked down the corridor to meet his brother. When Horus appeared, Russ knew instantly. But he saw the deeply hidden disdain in his brother's eyes. Not as good as Blaskowitz, Russ couldn't help but think. Brother, we need to talk alone, Horus invited. Russ nodded. When the door closed, Russ' demeanor immediately changed. Leman Russ, he said, stating his name. He was a different person entirely. The barbarian vanished, replaced by a wise and perceptive king. It was not until this moment that Horus truly realized how little he knew about this seemingly savage brother. A week later, the emperor sought out Blaskowitz alone. They walked through the intricate corridors to his private chambers, a space simple and unadorned, a stark contrast to the palace's splendor. Honor needs splendid embellishment, the emperor explained, sensing Blaskowitz's thoughts. The sacrifice of golden decorations is perhaps the only thing I can do to commemorate those mortals who gave their lives in the Great Crusade. Blaskowitz nodded heavily, agreeing with the emperor's words. What do you think of what Russ said? The emperor asked, his power armor gleaming. Participate in the Great Crusade and support my plan first. Blaskowitz crossed his arms and looked out the window. What is your next plan? He asked, unable to face the urgent plea in the emperor's eyes. The emperor answered with 2 words, the webway. Humanity's salvation. Webway. Blaskowitz spun around, his eyes sharp. He understood how the master of mankind had become involved with the webway. I've heard rumors of it, Blaskowitz said, and have some understanding. The emperor did not delve into how Blaskowitz knew about it. His calm, unruffled voice now held a hint of excitement. I plan to hack into the webway, move all of humanity into it, completely severing our reliance on the warp. Thereby removing humanity from the sight of the 4 gods. The emperor walked to a wall, pulling back a red curtain to reveal his plan. On that obsidian surface, his future was depicted with complex lines and numbers. Primarchs, space marines, the Great Crusade, the webway plan, species migration, and the beautiful future after escaping the 4 gods. He had used pure hand drawing, inscribing dreams and the future in gold. Do you think it will succeed? Blaskowitz asked. The emperor was silent, pondering. If anyone else had asked, he would have said yes, but Blaskowitz was different. With your help, the success rate can be increased by at least 30%, the emperor finally said. Originally it was only 50%, now it's 80%. Blaskowitz looked at him with an, I'm not easily fooled, expression. You said humanity only has 1 chance for revival. Blaskowitz asked. If you fail, do I still have a chance? Humanity indeed only has 1 chance, the emperor nodded. I have 1 chance, you have 1 chance. He pointed at himself, then at Blaskowitz. Before I saw you, I believed humanity truly only had 1 chance, and I had to seize it. Your return brought another chance, and I can even be bolder. As the emperor spoke, he grabbed a handful of gold dust and continued his artwork. First, complete my plan, then you and I will join forces. Bring your brothers, and after stabilizing humanity's situation, together challenge the 4 gods. The 4 gods are not blind or deaf, they will do everything in their power to stop you, Blaskowitz warned, grabbing some gold dust himself. As it scattered, an ugly 8-pointed star appeared on the obsidian. Its evil tendrils pointed at every key point of the emperor's plan, depicting primarchs corrupted by chaos, legions fighting each other, a destroyed webway, and a failed migration. At the center of the star, a glowing figure was imprisoned, the emperor himself, a prisoner of humanity's own species. That's why I need you. The emperor did not destroy the future Blaskowitz had depicted. He continued to move forward, throwing his own gold dust. As it scattered, a warrior rose, holding high a god-slaying sword, standing once again before humanity. He was unyielding and powerful, confronting the ugliness of the 4 gods. You get 1 chance, I get 1 chance. The emperor stood firm again, bringing the conversation back to its original point. He gave no commands or coercion. The plea and expectation in his eyes, like scorching sunlight, burned Blaskowitz. If I fail, I will do everything I can to stabilize the situation and help realize your opportunity. The emperor's voice was too sincere. Why are you so certain? Blaskowitz still had his arms crossed. So certain that I can seize the opportunity again. I am certain. The emperor's raised hand never lowered. You are the Doom Slayer, the unyielding Godslayer. If you fail, I am confident you can rise again. Blaskowitz looked at the emperor's outstretched hand, and finally at his eyes, which shone with an undisguised certainty. Finally, He extended his hand and clasped it with the emperor's. First, we shall execute your plan, complete the Great Crusade.